Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live today from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
It is a Fireball Hot Take Friday, our first I guess technically not our first Fireball Hot Take Friday of 2025. We had that last Friday, I guess, when we were on the air. So our second Fireball Hot Take Friday of 2025. So I want to start on this today. And this was a report that came out last night. And a bunch of people texted me last night when they saw the report. And I even commented on it on Twitter, saying I was at least a little skeptical. But Jonathan Jones of CBS, which, by the way, Ian, when does Jonathan Jones get a scoop?
Not usually much.
I mean, this guy, CBS has put him out there, but I'm not really sure that I know a whole lot about the guy. But Jonathan Jones says, quote, sources, the NFL has reviewed the description of the Titans GM position, and the two sides have agreed that the vacant position will be the primary football executive post. Non-GMs cannot be blocked by their current teams from accepting interview requests. Now, the reason that's important is because the NFL has a standard for allowing you to block an interview request. For instance, if you are an offensive coordinator who does not call plays and you get the opportunity to become an offensive coordinator who does call plays, then you get pushed off. You can interview for any offensive coordinator job, and your team can't stop you. What you can't do, for instance, is Arthur Smith, who calls the plays in Pittsburgh, cannot just be interviewed by the New England Patriots if Mike Vrabel gets the job. If you're the assistant general manager in, I don't know, let's pick a team, Green Bay. If you're the assistant general manager in Green Bay and the Dallas Cowboys want to interview you for a assistant general manager position, you have to get permission from Green Bay. If Jerry says, I want that guy in Green Bay so bad, I'll give up the general manager job, then that guy can get the job. You see what I'm saying? So again, Jonathan Jones is reporting that the NFL is comfortable that the Titans GM position is actually a real GM position. And it is not nothing that report came out. Which means, in my opinion, reading between the lines, that the Titans promised the league that Chad Brinker was going to be more like an administrator and less like a decision maker, if that makes any sense. My friend Josh Hurd is the athletic director at Louisville. He doesn't decide who the football team recruits. But let me say this. If there was a 5-star recruit out there and he had a domestic violence issue and Josh wanted to throw the stop sign up at third base, he could, because he's the athletic director. That is what Chad Brinker and I would assume Burke Nihill have promised the NFL Chad Brinker is going to be like. More like what Rich McKay was in Atlanta when he was the president than what Rich McKay was in Tampa Bay where he was the general manager. Now, what makes all of this confusing is the redundancy of Burke Nihill, who is the president and CEO of the Titans, which Rich McKay was in Atlanta with the Falcons. Again, it's weird, right? There's two presidents running the show. And again, when they make these decisions and they fire Rand Carthon, it's Burke Nihill who's part of the group giving quotes to the media. It's like, so are you the CEO of the football, or is he the CEO of the football? Or again, it's incredibly confusing. And I think the NFL maybe pushed on the Titans a little bit to say, no. We're not going to have a GM have all the GM powers except for the important ones, and then just say, oh, okay, it's all fair and good. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Titans said, okay, no, Chad's more an administrator than Chad is a decision maker. But the most important thing that came out of that is that the Titans cleared it up with the NFL. My guess is the Titans probably had to make some concessions. My guess is Chad Brinker had to sacrifice some of his power that he thought he had on Tuesday in order to satisfy the league. So I asked somebody today who was familiar with Rich McKay's role in Atlanta. If you remember, Rich McKay was the general manager of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they won the Super Bowl with John Gruden as the coach. And then he went to Atlanta, where he became the president and the CEO of the Falcons. And so Rich McKay was there when Thomas Dimitroff drafted Matt Ryan. And he was there when Thomas Dimitroff fired Mike Smith and hired Dan Quinn. And he was there when they fired Thomas Dimitroff and Dan Quinn and hired Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot. And if you remember, last year when Belichick was viewed as the favorite for the Falcons job, a lot of the talk was, well, Rich McKay doesn't really want to work with Belichick. And what ended up happening was Belichick didn't get the job, but Rich McKay got moved out of the operation, and now he's CEO of the soccer team. So, again, I'm not exactly sure what Rich McKay did or didn't do in Atlanta, so I asked somebody who would know. And I spoke to someone who was familiar with Rich McKay's role in Atlanta, and they said, if the Titans are incorporating that model into what they're doing, or the Packers with Mark Murphy, who is the president of the team, then Chad Brinker is really looking for the chief scout. That they're looking for the best scout to be GM. And I will tell you this about football. If you have the best players, you're going to win. In college football, for instance, Larry Coker and Ed Orgeron have national championship rings. And I think we can all agree it's not because Coach O was some sort of diabolical football genius, but because of Andre Johnson, Vince Wilfork, Ed Reed, Clinton Portis, and then in the case of LSU, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. I mean, you get all those good players, Larry Coker, you're going to win a national title. You may not be able to coach worth a damn. It doesn't matter. Barry Switzer won the Super Bowl with Jimmy Johnson's players. So if they get the right scout leading the football operation, and all Chad Brinker has to do is administrate and take credit, then you could, in theory, have a good team, even with a crazy owner. Now, I'm not saying that all of a sudden I believe in the Titans, because I'm also not ignoring that Jonathan Jones report, which is giving me a sliver of optimism that Chad Brinker could actually take his hands off the team and let someone who knows how to build a football team build a real football team. But at the same time, I'm still skeptical. My guess is, again, I keep telling you, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. It looks like Chad Brinker stabbed Brand Carthon in the back. It looks like Chad Brinker and Burke Nihill are in cahoots trying to get all the power in the organization. It quacks like the Titans are trying to go around the Rooney Rule. And so chances are it probably is a duck. But the one thing that I do know is the Tennessee Titans, if the NFL comes knocking, the Tennessee Titans will not push back. So when Jonathan Jones says that the NFL is comfortable with the Titans GM position being the primary decision-making post, I have to believe there's something to that. I have to believe that the NFL has flexed a muscle and has said, whoa now. You guys aren't just going to fire Rand Carthon and put in Chad Brinker and now say Chad's the de facto guy even with. And I don't know if that's what the Titans want or don't want. Again, I don't understand this whole two-headed president thing. If you want to be the Packers, which is what it looks like Chad Brinker wants to be, and you want to be Mark Murphy does what Burke Nihill does for a team with no owner. So then what does Burke do? So is he basically just, they're working together? Now, I highly doubt Burke Nihill is going to give up that kind of power. So now you got the two presidents and the two decision makers and the added layer, and that just adds to the confusion. But the one thing that I'm not confused about is if the NFL says that's going to be the chief decision-making post, my guess is they probably flexed on the Titans. They probably told the Titans, you know what? If you guys are going to do this, you have to give that GM real power. Now, will the Titans give that GM real power? I don't know. But if the NFL says it, you ain't Jerry Jones in Dallas. You're the Titans. You better do it. So that is not nothing. That means they could, in theory, actually hire a good general manager and actually build a good team. Again, I'm betting against it, but I'm rooting for it. That was good news to hear. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number on this snowy Friday. 615-737-1025. And there is a name in the GM search that is starting to get highlighted that is not one that I would advocate for, but there at least are some qualities that I like. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman & Company, 1025 The Game.
You have to look at the Packers, right? And I think that's why a guy like Reggie McKenzie, I think that's why he comes into play. He has a history, with the Packers. Obviously, he's with the Dolphins now, but it has to be somebody that's comfortable enough to feel that they could come in and be able to do their job without having to look over their shoulder too much. Because, let's face the facts. The way things happen, optically, it's not very attractive, right? So you have to be comfortable and be trusting. So that's more or less what I gathered.
That was TD yesterday saying, hey, I'm hearing the name of Reggie McKenzie. And today, Diana Rossini had a tweet. Who knows what Diana knows now that Vrabel's not here anymore? But Diana said, according to her sources, Reggie McKenzie might be the leader in the clubhouse. The Titans did complete their GM interview with Reggie McKenzie, who's currently with the Dolphins today. They have a bunch of interviews loaded up, again, all virtual throughout the course of the weekend. And my favorite of the list right now is clearly Thomas Dimitroff. I would have fired everybody and put Thomas Dimitroff in charge. And I told Thomas Dimitroff that last year at the Super Bowl when he was trying to make a case for Rand because he hired Rand in Atlanta. And you know how the brotherhood is. And he was trying to make a case for Rand. And I said, Ian, tell him who I would have hired. And Ian said he would have hired you, Thomas. And that certainly made Thomas uncomfortable. So that's who my favorite of the group is. I don't know any of these assistant general managers. I'm not going to pretend to know because some guy's buddies with an insider and it's like, oh no, Ian Cunningham, you don't understand. I don't know Ian Cunningham from a jar of Vicks. And so how could I tell you what he is or isn't good at or whatever, but I do know the guys that have done the jobs. So let's talk Reggie McKenzie because TD didn't just say that without having, at least some sort of insight into Reggie McKenzie being a part of the mix. And then Diana Rossini today saying that it looks like Reggie McKenzie might be the favorite. I wouldn't be totally against it. It doesn't mean I'd be totally for it, but it doesn't mean I would be totally against it, even though he is clearly one of Chad Brinker's buddies from the Packers. And he was GM of the Raiders from 2012 to 18, and they kind of stunk. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because one thing I do want is I want experience. Again, if this guy's actually going to have some sort of a say, I want some experience. And I think he did an okay job in Oakland before he was kind of pushed aside by John Gruden, and not really because Reggie McKenzie stunk. Again, we have to factor in Oakland/Vegas. He was in Oakland. That's a screwed up place. And so they had that good year under Del Rio, and then Derek Carr broke his leg, and they ended up losing in the playoffs. And then after that, the owner had a Woody in his pants for John Gruden. So I'm not going to totally hold that against Reggie McKenzie. And again, I want experience, and he has it. Now, I'm also cautious about him being a Packer through and through. And we know that that's what Brinker wants, is he wants a Packer. He wants to be the Packers. He's the guy who takes a job and says to everybody, well, at my last job, what we did, that's what Brinker is. Brinker wants to be the Packers. And he's convinced Amy that we should be the Packers. And so, again, he's going to get his buddy from the Packers, which I don't necessarily like. But at least it's a guy that's got some experience being a GM in the NFL. Now, it should be noted, though, the Titans have to conduct 2 external minority interviews, and McKenzie does check that box, as does Ian Cunningham from the Bears. And apparently, I don't know, Ian, does Catherine Hickman of the Browns count? She's a woman. She's not black, but she's a woman.
I don't know. I
Does
can
that
do some
count
research.
as an external minority interview?
I'd have to do some research on that. I'm not sure.
Again, a white woman is not considered a minority, I don't think, but a woman is considered a minority, especially in football. So I don't know, but again, Ian Cunningham would check
I think
the
it
other
does.
box
The
there.
NFL Rooney Rule, from just a quick search, does include women as candidates for top positions such as head coach, coordinator, and senior level front office positions.
Okay, so they'll have that box checked by dinner time tonight. So when I saw Reggie McKenzie's name, knowing deep down inside that I'm going to have to settle for something Brinker Packers related, I said, okay, Reggie McKenzie might be something that we can start with. Now, I'm just going to tell you this. Some of you will care about this, and I do not. Reggie McKenzie played for the Vols. I don't care about that.
I didn't know that.
You might care about that, but I don't care about that. I'll never forget when John Robinson got the job, and it was like, he's from Tennessee. And Floyd said, he texted me, and he said he's coming home. And I said, who cares that you're from Tennessee or you're not from Tennessee? Who cares? Wait, so if he got the Dallas Cowboy job, he would work less hard because he's not from Dallas? So I don't give a rat's ass that he went to UT. But some of you out there, they slap us in the face for not drafting Hendon Hooker. Some of you guys out there are going to think, he's a ball. He'll come in here and he'll work doubly hard. Whatever.
I'm coming home.
You actually have that cut.
Yeah, we used to play that drop on, I think it was A to Z Sports when he first got hired. We used to play that. Yeah. Give me that one again.
I'm coming home.
I'm coming home like it means something. So I'll throw that aside. I don't give a rat's ass about that. And here's the other thing. Reggie McKenzie's picks in Oakland, they kind of sucked. Khalil Mack, very, very good. Derek Carr, 10-year starter at quarterback. And I would say a 10-year starter at quarterback is good, even though Carr is not my cup of tea. Amari Cooper made 5 Pro Bowls, and Latavius Murray has made 1 Pro Bowl in his career. He's a 4th-round pick in 2013. But over a 6-year period as general manager, Reggie McKenzie drafted 4 Pro Bowlers. That's probably not good enough. He drafted 1 All-Pro, Khalil Mack, with which he had the 5th pick. And again, I'm not saying that, you can't bust on the 5th pick, because you can, but 1 All-Pro, that's probably not good enough. John Robinson, who you all hate, drafted 4 All-Pros. So just keep that in mind. And if I had to make a pick here, if I got Chad Brinker's job, which I'd have to really up my dishonesty and snake oil in order to do that. I think if I tried hard enough, I think I probably could be dishonest enough to manipulate people into, wanting me to be GM or something crazy like that. But again, I don't have that inside of me. I'd like to think I'm an honest person and I value that. But if I was in Chad Brinker's spot and I had the pick as to what they're going to do or what they're not going to do, I actually like the GM the Raiders just fired, Tom Telesco. I actually like him more over Reggie McKenzie. At least he can look at you and say, I drafted Justin Herbert. But we also have to keep in mind the Oakland Raiders, that was Reggie McKenzie's only GM job, and it was a screwed up place. It is still a screwed up place. So I would at least listen to him because he's got experience, and that's the most important thing I've asked for, is to get these bozos that don't know what they're doing out of there and bring in somebody who at least knows how to be GM. And I have no idea if these assistant general managers out there know how to be GM or not. And if I had to guess, I would say they probably don't. Just like Brian Callahan didn't know how to be head coach when he took the job. So give me a GM who's done it. And so while I'd much rather have Dimitrov, if he's actually going to do the GM job, I'd much rather have Thomas Dimitrov than Reggie McKenzie. At least there's something we can start with when it comes to all of this. So, again, it sounds like, TD made it abundantly clear yesterday. It sounds like you're going to go get the Packer buddy system. And if I had to guess, boy, I don't know if I want to call this or not, Ian. But I think I'm going to hold off on calling it for now.
Okay.
Again, the Titans can't interview the Packer people until the Packers are eliminated from the playoffs. And I don't even know when that game is. Is that Sunday afternoon? Packers and Eagles?
I believe that's the 3:30 afternoon game, yeah.
Okay. So that means that on Sunday night, Monday, they could start interviewing the Packer people because the Packers are going to lose to Philadelphia. So on Sunday night, Monday, they can start interviewing the Packer people. Part of me thinks that it's going to be one of Brinker's buddies, going to be the GM, and then Reggie McKenzie might be a part of that group that they bring in here. Then Reggie McKenzie might not be GM, but he'll be a part of the group. And then we're just waiting for the Packer people in order to become available, and then one of the Brinker's Packer buddies is going to. And I hate that. But again, if you put Reggie McKenzie in the GM spot and you let him be GM, at least he's got some experience outside of kissing Brinker's ass, which is the most important thing here for me. 615-737-1025. We'll get some of your phones. Plus, there is a narrative. There is a narrative that is starting to go out that I just do not believe as part of the Days of Our Titans, which, by the way, I hear is getting stolen. I hear other people are using it. Kind of sad to be plagiarized, but it is what it is. But there is a narrative that is getting spun, and I ain't buying it. And you can tell me till the cows come home, and I'm still not going to believe it. And I think a lot of you are going to start believing it. So we'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
Amy is starting to basically look at someone and go, this person's more useful than that person. And she's not around every day. So she's not, it's like, how in tune is she to everybody's jobs, everybody's roles, what everybody's doing? You know, I think she can be swayed and moved, as many owners can. And the most influential, and I can tell you this going back to like Mike Tannenbaum when he was with the Jets and then with the Miami Dolphins, the most influential person in an organization underneath an owner is someone who could do many things. That is very impressive to owners. And Chad Brinker, through no fault of his own, has an extremely wide base of experience. Extremely wide. Like one of the most varied bases of experience of almost any NFL executive that really you can find. I mean, look, 8 years in scouting, 3 years in cap, 2 years in football ops. He's got analytics under his belt. I mean, he's a nexus guy. He is someone who can sit in the middle and talk knowledgeably and smartly to Amy about almost anything in the operation. So what happens is Amy starts to look at Chad Brinker and go, this guy's really useful.
That was Charles Robinson on Robbie and Joe this week saying, hey, Amy just saw Chad Brinker and thought, you know, Chad Brinker, he's got all this experience and he's so smart and he's got all these buzzwords and blah, blah, blah. And it was Amy that has circled Chad, and it wasn't Chad who was going after Amy. Sure. So there's a narrative that's starting to come out. I kind of got surprised with it this morning on Robbie and Rex Road when I went on and did my morning show hit. And Ian, I don't know, did you listen to Robbie and Joe a lot this morning?
Some. I missed your hit, though.
So Joe, it sounds like, is starting to convince himself that, or is letting Paul convince him that Brinker did not stab Rand Carthon in the back. Did you hear some of that today?
No, I don't think I did.
So I was a little surprised because Joe was like, do you think that Brinker stabbed Rand in the back? And I'm like, didn't we spend an entire Jared versus Joe agreeing about that? That Brinker definitely threw Rand under the bus. He's throwing Rand under the bus right now. He and Burke Nihill are talking to all the guys in the local press about, you know, we got to do this differently, and we got to hold Brian Callahan accountable, and we got to, like, wait a minute, what? You were there. You were a part of it. Y'all were so aligned. Y'all were like long-lost brothers. What happened to that? So you got your long-lost brother fired? No. Amy just made that decision herself. Look, I'm open to the possibility that happened, but I really don't believe that's what happened. So what I think Chad Brinker and Burke Nihill have completely hoodwinked Amy Adams Strunk. But again, there is this growing sentiment that Chad Brinker didn't stab Rand in the back. Oh no, Amy did this. It was her decision and blah, 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 blah. So if I'm willing to believe that, if I'm willing to believe that Chad was doing the best he could with Rand and Brian Callahan every day and wasn't stabbing people in the back and wasn't trying to get out the Rand Carthon crew, Rand, Anthony Robinson, Brian Callahan, so he could bring in the Packer way, if he wasn't trying to do that, then am I supposed to also believe that Chad Brinker was pulling the rope in the same direction as everybody else? And I have a really hard time understanding that. So again, I want you to map this out for me. Brian Callahan went on record on Monday and said, Chad Brinker was in all the discussions and all the decisions. Me, Rand, and Chad were all working together. So this lack of culpability for Brinker for what happened last year doesn't exist because, according to Brian Callahan, who I don't think would lie about this, Brian Callahan says Chad was pulling the rope in that direction. We also have all these cuts of Chad talking about how aligned he and Rand were and about how they're all in this together and how great the group was and everything else that we've already played. So if that's true, do you want me to believe that Chad Brinker every day was working on this football team, was dedicating his blood, his sweat, his tears, and he was pulling the rope with Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan and Anthony Robinson with this great collaboration, the Lions model. He was pulling this rope with everybody in the same direction every day with his ideas at the forefront. His analytics model, his AIcancercuring.com model, that they were all doing that in the same direction. And then all of a sudden, Amy just decided, this is unacceptable. So Rand goes, Chad stays. That's what you're asking me to believe. If everybody is telling the truth. Ian, do you believe those two things?
Not necessarily.
Even Ian doesn't believe it. So again, this is why I think they've hoodwinked Amy, and I'm unwilling to believe anything else unless somebody truly maps it out for me. And considering that it's been 4 days and they haven't had a press conference, I have a really hard time believing they actually want to talk about this. Have you noticed all their availabilities? Brinker and Nihil were all with local print reporters. Nothing live. Nothing that, hey, you could be caught off guard. Nothing new. Let's call the print reporters. Let's sit everybody in the room. We can thumbs up, thumbs down. They haven't even gone on 104.5. They haven't even done a sit down with their own people. Now, granted, that might be a little difficult because Mike Keith's not there anymore. But this is what I truly believe. And I'm going to pull a Chris Sanders here. Because you know when Chris Sanders says, I mean this respectfully. I do not mean what I'm about to say maliciously. I do not mean this personally. I'm serious. I do not mean this personally. I think Chad Brinker's a con artist. I think that that's what he is. And I think what Chad Brinker has an incredible ability. I don't think he knows ball. I don't really think he's all that smart, even though he can use corporate buzzwords and things like that. I truly believe that he is an expert manipulator. I think I've had one conversation with Chad Brinker in my life. And in that conversation, Chad Brinker told me exactly what I wanted to hear. And that's the thing about con artists. They find a way to tell you exactly what you want to hear. And I am convinced that's what Brinker does. When Brinker was pumping the sunshine and talking about alignment and he and Rand and how great Rand was and everything else on that podcast with Mike Keith, that's because that's what Amy wanted to hear. But after the results got bad, Amy probably didn't want to hear that anymore. Amy wanted to hear something new. Amy wanted to hear something fresh. Amy wants, I assume desperately, when Amy says in that statement, I love the Titans more than you can imagine, I believe that. And so Chad tells Amy, I've got the way to make it work. I reported this to you last week before Rand got fired. And what I was told was that Chad Brinker had buddied up to Bryce Wasserman, who is Amy's future son-in-law in the front office, who is the direct line to Amy, who's not there every day. I am convinced that Chad Brinker knows exactly what to say to whoever it is he's talking to. He knows exactly what to say. And again, that's how a successful con artist works. We just think a con artist takes advantage of stupid people, and there's some truth to that. But when it comes to taking advantage of, there are some smart people that have told me, you know, man, I'll tell you, Chad Brinker, it seems like he's got a plan. And I'm saying to myself and to them, draft, develop, and retain, that's your genius plan? I mean, I heard the analytics last year. And I saw people on Twitter say, these analytics are going to put us over the top. I have people call me and say, you will see our analytics. Mike Vrabel didn't know anything about analytics. John Robinson didn't know anything about analytics. Ryan Cowden didn't know anything about analytics. But you'll see. I'm like, okay. Again, I don't think I'm smarter than everybody else. I really don't. But the one thing that I think I'm pretty good at is I'm pretty good at seeking out bull crap and calling it out. And so now this narrative exists that Chad Brinker did not stab Rand in the back. That Chad Brinker was doing his job great, and Amy just decided that Chad's the way to go. Even though Brian Callahan told you on Monday that Chad was every bit a part of the decisions that have been made over the last year. And so you really believe that at the same time, he didn't stab Rand in the back, and he was working hard every day hand in hand with Rand. You really believe those two things can both be true? I got a hard time with that. And again, like I said, I say this respectfully, but it seems to me like he's a con artist. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number on the program, 615-737-1025. Paul Kaharski says he is not carrying water for Chad Brinker. So then somebody's got some explaining to do. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025. And we will get to your phones, I promise. Here on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Hey, the Game Sports Nashville Network is your home for the college football playoff, presented by Twin Peaks Empowerment Tractor and Equipment. How good was the game last night? Tonight, tune into 102.5 and 106.3 The Game for Ohio State and Texas, live from the Cotton Bowl. Kickoff is at 6:30. Stillman and Company, Fireball Hot Take Friday, 102.5 The Game.
I know there's kind of a ridiculous train of thought out there that some people are saying about me. I'm carrying water for the organization. It's nonsense. You guys know me. I've covered the organization for a long time. I've got multiple people that I talk to, and I'm telling you about what's happening. And I would just say, if you're listening to people who are saying I'm carrying water for the organization, well, ask them who they're carrying water for then. Right? If they think I'm sourced by one side, which I'm not, I'm sourced by people who are there, who are telling me what's going on and what their feelings are. But if you're talking to somebody who's saying that I'm somehow carrying water for Chad Brinker is not the source of any of that information, by the way, about Ray. No, none of it. If somebody's telling you I'm carrying water for Chad Brinker or for the Titans, ask them who they're carrying water for. Because if they're so counter to this information, which is 100% accurate, they're getting their information for somebody and telling somebody's story.
That was Paul Kaharski yesterday on the Paul Kaharski podcast. Ian, do you have an idea who Paul Kaharski's talking about there?
What do you mean about people saying that he's carrying water? Probably you.
It's probably me. I mean, how long have we been accusing Paul of carrying water for Chad Brinker? For literally like for 4 months, we've been accusing Paul of carrying water for Chad Brinker. When Paul goes out of his way, to criticize Rand, but to leave Brinker out of it, back when we thought they were buddy-buddy, before we knew that, one was King Lear and the other was, I don't even remember the characters from King Lear. Sorry, Dr. Wheeler and AP English. We'll stay with Caesar and Brutus. So I'll say to this. Paul Kaharski says, I am not carrying water for Chad Brinker. Ian Rappaport just put out an hour ago that the Titans are going to request John Eric Sullivan of the Green Bay Packers to interview for the GM position. And TD has said, I could see Reggie McKenzie in the mix and John Eric Sullivan in the mix and some other guy, Lee, Grisendale, Wall, whatever. Eric Sullivan before. Ian, had you ever heard of John Eric Sullivan before Tuesday?
Don't know him from a jar of Vicks.
Okay. At 9:40 a.m., the Titans announced that Rand Carthon was fired and Chad Brinker was in charge. At 11:40 a.m., 2 hours later, an article at paulkaharski.com, the first name to watch for Titans GM, and it's a giant picture of John Eric Sullivan. Paul wrote at paulkaharski.com, John Eric Sullivan is currently the Packers vice president of player personnel, and he worked with Brinker in Green Bay for 13 years. He's been in his current post for 3 years, working up from 4 seasons as co-director of player personnel for 4 seasons and 2 years of director of college scouting. He's also been a college scout covering the Central Plains region from 2008 to 11 and the southeastern region from 2012 to 2015 after working as the team's national football scouting representative to the annual NFL scouting combine and authorizing evaluations of all prospective seniors in the Southwest region. Sullivan's father, Jerry, Paul writes, coached 50 years at the college and pro levels with expertise in wide receivers. He spent his time with the Chargers, Cardinals, Lions, Dolphins, 49ers, Jags, Ohio State, and LSU, amongst others. Without final say on personnel, the younger Sullivan could view a move from his current post to Titans GM as lateral. Still, I'd imagine Sullivan will be one of Brinker's first phone calls. So again, 2 hours after Rand Carthon got fired, PK has a piece out there with the complete and total bio of the first name to watch. And you think he just pulled that out of thin air? Who the F is John Eric Sullivan? PK knew 2 hours after Rand got fired. In fact, when it came to the Titans, the PK's articles, the first article he put out after Rand got fired was the one about Rand sleeping on the plane that he was afraid to put out, didn't want to put out until Rand got fired, made sure to wait until Rand got fired before he put that out. And then, so a Rand hit piece at 11:19, and then Chad's first choice at 11:40 a.m. And now they're interviewing John Eric Sullivan. And he's going to tell you, I don't carry water for Chad Brinker. Really? Because it looks like you do. Joe and Robbie, really more Joe, spent all Wednesday morning saying, boy, I tell you, the text line saying PK stop carrying water for the Titans. It's fine. It's fine if you're the direct link to Brinker. That's fine that we know when you report things that it's coming from Brinker, and that's fine. We did that with Vrabel and Diana for years. But don't say it's my fault or I'm the one who's like, who's he carrying water for? You think I'm carrying water for Ran Carthon when I say, I'm pretty sure Chad stabbed Ran in the back. You think I'm carrying water for Ran Carthon? Me. Give me a break. You think I'm carrying water for Vrabel? Me? Vrabel hates me. What are we talking about? Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Chandler is going to kick us off on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Thank you for calling and waiting. Chandler, go ahead.
Hey, Jared. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to, I'm not going to try to take up too much time here, but I wanted to note the security director, senior security director, John Albertson, was fired as well. And on his Facebook, there's been some interesting posts since, one of those being to start, let's see here. He says, respect is earned, not demanded.
Stuff? Is it all cryptic stuff like fortune cookie stuff? Or is it like, Chad Brinker's a lying piece of crap?
It's respect is earned, not demanded, but fake it long enough, and some people might not notice the difference. Well, then he takes a trip to New York and claims it's for business. This is when the Titans GM job was getting investigated. And then he makes a comment to his wife, and that when she comments on his great career with the Titans, it says he's always been known to expose the truth. That's all I got to say.
Well,
Thanks,
again,
Jared.
I'm not going to say he doesn't have information. I mean, he's director of security with the Titans. I'm sure he's got information, and I appreciate your call. But again, I'm not getting into this. I'm not doing AJ Brown's Twitter with the former director of security from the Titans. If you got something to say it. Not, hey, let's put these pieces. This guy tweeted out and he liked this. If you want to say Chad Brinker is the biggest con artist there ever was, Jared, you're right, then just say it. But I'm not going to start putting the pieces together and try to one way or another. Dylan and Antioch's up next on the program. Dylan, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared. I like that Shakespeare reference. It's like Julius Caesar getting stabbed in the Roman Forum and turning around saying, "Et tu, Brute?" I feel like that's Ran to Chad right now. Whatever happened to the hunting together versus hunting individually thing? So they're going to fire Ran, and then they're going to act like they never said that. No, that never happened. So if it's
Ran is the one who said it, though. Brinker didn't. But to your point, we've run about 15 cuts this week of Chad Brinker on the podcast last year, just talking about how great Ran was and how aligned they were and how everybody was pulling the rope in the same direction. And then the second that he got power, he fired everybody. So except for Callahan, who the owner wouldn't let him fire. I feel like
Ran got kind of screwed over. I just feel like Ran got kind of screwed over. I like some of those moves. I like the Legere Sneed move. I know you didn't. I like Calvin Ridley. Tony Pollard was fine. Is that all on Ran, or where does that fall on Chad? Now they're going to promote him. It makes zero sense. This franchise makes zero sense. Oh my God, it kills me. Okay, all right, thanks.
Yep, I hope that made you feel better to say that. Again, what's happened is everybody was highly emotional on Tuesday when the Titans found a way to piss everybody off by the Ran crowd, the stability crowd. They pissed them off by firing Ran, and the clean house crowd, they pissed us off by keeping Brinker. And so everybody was all aligned, at hating the Titans for doing the stupidest possible thing. The difference between me and other people are that the way that this works is once the emotion wears off, I think sometimes people try to convince themselves that it'll be okay, or narratives start to spin out there. Actually, Brinker, he might view things differently. He's gonna, etc. And I don't do that. Like I tell you, once I figure something out, I'm like, okay, this is what it is, and not the other way around. And it does kind of feel, as far as I'm concerned, like there are some people that are now like Joe today saying maybe Brinker didn't stab Rand in the back? Maybe. And then it'll come out that maybe Brinker really didn't do much last year as far as the team was concerned. And maybe. And because Brinker knows how to manipulate people, Brinker's got some people in the media he's convincing, and they're going to tell you his side of the story, and you're going to, not all of you, but some of you out there are going to believe it. Because you want to believe it because you want the Titans to be good, or you'll get manipulated into this. For me, I keep going back to the duck theory. Like, to me, it looked like this time last year they were sniffing each other's butts, and now one guy is championed and the other guy's been fired, and it kind of feels like, somebody wasn't telling the truth. No, Jared, you don't understand. Yeah, I've only been right about everybody's bullcrap for the last 2 years when it comes to this organization. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Somebody has to explain something to me. Something that we used to dog Rand for. And Rand's not here anymore. And it's still happening. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 105 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. The Titans have already conducted one GM interview with Reggie McKenzie, former Raiders general manager. Now he's in a senior football executive position with the Dolphins. There's all these names that are coming out that are going to interview for the job. John Spytek is interviewing for the job. Catherine Hickman is interviewing for the job. Ian Cunningham is interviewing for the job. Thomas Dimitrov is interviewing for the job. The Titans have reached out to John Eric Sullivan, who I guess PK pulled out of his ass an hour after Rand got fired, saying this guy might be the first call for GM, and so on and so forth. But there was a big criticism of Rand Carthon's over the 2 years that he was the general manager that apparently everybody's just ignoring now. Rand Carthon did not do press conferences. I don't know if it was because Rand Carthon didn't want to do press conferences, or if it was, and what I find to be more likely, and I have heard, the Titans didn't want Rand Carthon doing press conferences. Remember that embarrassing draft night press conference where Vrabel basically objected to Carthon's media criticism? Yeah, apparently the Titans were mortified by that. And they wanted Rand doing as few press conferences as possible. Then they stuck him out there for the ball didn't bounce our way press conference, and that was pretty much the end of that. Every other press conference Rand Carthon did was pretty much a press conference that the league made him do. So, Rand didn't do press conferences. Then it comes out after Rand gets fired, D. May said on the midday show that after the trade deadline, TD said this himself, TD reached out to the Titans about sitting down with Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker. Rand Carthon accepted TD's invitation to sit down to talk about the state of the team after the trade deadline. Chad Brinker was the one that did not and decided to not have Rand do it. So again, the big criticism of Rand was that Rand didn't hold press conferences and Rand didn't talk. Well, Rand Carthon was fired on Tuesday. And in the same release with which the Titans fired Rand Carthon, Burke Nihill made it unquestionably clear that Chad Brinker is the king of Tennessee Titans football. If there was whatever title you want, the czar, the dictator, whatever, the emperor, Chad Brinker is that when it comes to the Titans. And as of 9:40 Tuesday morning, everybody knew it. There was some talk ahead of time that, hey, Chad Brinker's the one really running the Titans. But now it's cemented. When's the press conference? Rand fired on Tuesday. Chad anointed emperor on Tuesday. No press conference on Tuesday. No press conference on Wednesday. No press conference on Thursday. No press conference on Friday. When's the press conference? And I know Chad Brinker and Burke Nihill called the Tennessean and they called PK and they called TD. I know. But again, that's not the same as a press conference. And it's a lot easier to get somebody on the phone for 5 minutes to say, yeah, we want to draft, develop, retain, than it is to stand up there in live time when your fans are watching. PK has lamented this for a long time, saying that he hates that press conferences are carried live. Hates it. Because, back in the day before press conferences were carried live, you could ask a question about something, the coach would brush it off, and then you just brushed it off and nobody knew about it. Now the coach brushed it off and everyone says, oh, well, because they see it. Well, again, you got to keep in mind in 2025, this is the reality. If Chad Brinker holds a press conference on Tuesday after they fire Rand Carthon, everybody's watching that. There's going to be contentious questions, and there are questions that need to be asked. When's the press conference? Again, we crapped on Rand for never talking to the media, for never doing press conferences. Then it comes out, hey, Rand wanted to talk. Chad was the one that said don't. In fact, this was around the trade deadline on the Robbie and Rex Road program. Ian, if you could, this was PK's breakdown at the time about Rand Carthon and his unwillingness to talk to the media and listen to what PK said. And again, this is about a guy who hasn't been here since Tuesday, and the guys who have replaced him have not held a press conference Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday.
Will Rand talk?
No, Rand talk. That's fun.
Will Amy talk?
Rand's under a rock somewhere. Rand's never going to. Rand will talk. I'm risking it right now, but Rand will talk once a year at, in a meaningful conversation at the owners' meeting.
I said 35-65 he talks this week. Am I
35-65?
What are you talking about?
There's a 2% chance that Rand will talk.
We got a lot of disagreements on percentages.
I'll request Rand today, and they'll say, no, Callahan will speak on behalf of this. We have a better chance of Brinker talking.
Because
because Brinker understands that it's important for somebody for there to be some expression of something. I don't think he'll talk either. But the idea that Rand's going to get in front of a microphone after this,
he should.
There's no way.
Amy should talk.
Dude, should he talk? 100%.
Okay.
Will he talk? 2%.
Don't stop pushing, PK.
Stop pushing.
Don't give up. You're giving up.
I mean, have you not learned that Rand Carthon has no interest whatsoever in having a public face and accountability for anything the Titans do?
Okay. So Rand is, he won't talk. He's under a rock. He won't get in front of a microphone. He won't. Rand was fired on Tuesday. On Tuesday, there was no press conference with Burke Nihill or Chad Brinker. On Wednesday, there was no press conference. On Thursday, there was no press conference. And on Friday, there's been no press conference. But as PK said, Brinker might talk because he understands how important it is to be a public face. He's not talking this week. By the way, it should be noted, when Ken Wisenhunt got fired, Steve Underwood held a press conference. When Mike Mularkey got fired, John Robinson held a press conference. But after that, John Robinson got fired, no press conference. And boy, did they get taken to the woodshed for that. Mike Vrabel fired, Rand does a press conference, but it was a disaster. He couldn't even speak to it. And now Rand fired, again, no press conference. Unbelievable. Let's go to Mike, who's up next here on our program on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Been waiting very patiently on Brinker and Carthon. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a very small point about the backstab narrative or phrase or whatever. Brinker was Rand's boss. I know that they were big on collaboration and all of that. And anytime you've got a manager and some supervisor that's under them, yes, they're going to try to collaborate. But at the end of the day, Brinker was Rand's boss. And when your boss is not satisfied with your work ethic and goes to the owner about letting you go, that's not a friend stabbing a friend in the back. It's just being unsatisfied with his work ethic.
So why didn't he say that?
They don't want to get it. It's a bad look to get out publicly and be like, hey, this guy has a bad work ethic, so we fired him. I mean, even letting the information out the way that they have has been a bad look. Had they come out and said it directly, it would have been an even worse look.
Okay, so then what about when Chad became Rand's boss? Was that not a power play when he went from his lieutenant assistant general manager to his boss?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is very...
Because I was told at the time it was more alignment was what I was told. Now, I knew it was bullcrap, and I called it bullcrap, and then I got called racist for it.
The whole franchise is very Game of Thrones-ish, and that is the culture that Amy has set up with her decisions that she's made. But still, just the point is that when your boss is unhappy with your work ethic and goes to the owner about replacing you, that's not stabbing somebody in the back.
So they weren't aligned, is what you're saying.
They were not aligned. That's obvious.
Okay, so then they weren't telling the truth. And that's the whole point. Thank you for the call. That's the whole point, is the just blatant dishonesty Oh, we're so aligned, Rand and I. I just wish you guys could see how aligned we are, how great everything is. Kumbaya. Actually, I think he's a lazy bum. You see the dishonesty in that? I got a problem with that. Again, all I ask for is just a little honesty. I'm not asking for you to tell me the secret to everything. I'm not asking you to give me Colonel Sanders' secret herbs and spices. What I'm asking you to do is to tell me what the ingredients are, because if somebody's got a food allergy, they might die. In this case, I'm just asking you to have a shred of integrity. And the Titans have proven they're never going to do that. 615-737-1025. Corey Curtis, News 2, his reaction to all of this is coming up next here on the program. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game. Hey, let me tell everybody, we've got 75% off of everything right now at thegamenashville.com/deals. That's right. All of Nashville's best deals are marked down lower than ever. Go to thegamenashville.com/deals for 75% off of Bad Axe Throwing, Soar Adventure Park, Fog Street Lawn Club, and more. Everything has got to go. So you better go fast to thegamenashville.com/deals now while supplies last. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Corey Curtis, News 2, joins us now on the program, as he always does on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Corey, I'm opening it up to you. Your reaction to this week in the Titans.
I wasn't surprised. I mean, because we'd all been hearing grumblings about that since like mid-season that it could happen. So I don't really understand the uproar that it's caused. Is it, pulling the plug on a guy in 2 years? Is it ideal? No, it's not. But we've all hired someone and then hired someone and then had buyer's remorse.
I mean, I can tell you what the uproar is right now. The uproar is there were two warring factions of this fan base. There was one that wanted stability and thought that Rand deserved a fair shot. They feel like he didn't get it. And there was another side that wanted a complete clean house, and instead they took Rand's lieutenant and put him in as czar of football.
Okay. So you're either upset that they did something or that they didn't do enough.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm going to guess you fall into, and forgive me for not listening that much this week, you fall into the camp of upset that they didn't do enough.
Correct. I mean, if they were aligned, like Brinker said, and if they saw eye to eye on everything, and if they were all making the decisions together, like Brian Callahan said on Monday, why the hell does Chad Brinker get a free pass?
Well, but maybe it's not the decisions that are made. Maybe it's the relationships in the building and how things operate. I don't know. You don't know. I don't think.
But I thought Rand was Mr. Relationship. They told me that for 2 years, that he was the best relationship guy in the history of the NFL.
Well, maybe it changed. John Robinson was a really good GM for 3 years, and then that changed.
Yeah, but nobody ever told me that John Robinson was the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Somebody being a nice guy and a good employee or good at his job or whatever. I'm just saying, I don't think she fired him for no reason. Okay. I don't think she said, you know what? I'm going to eat this money just because of a whim. I understand the optics of it. I do. Jared Mayo got fired after a year after, Robert Kraft had a love fest with him and talked about what a great coach he was going to be and everything. And in a year with a horrible roster, he gets fired. What changed? What changed?
I feel like I'm talking to Kaharski right here. So you don't think that you don't think what the Titans did this week was out of line at all?
I don't think it's as crazy as everyone else seems to think. It's not ideal, but finishing 3-14 is not ideal. I mean,
but again, Chad Brinker is culpable in this, is he not?
Again, that's assuming, and I just said that things are going to change when you're 3-14, but it's assuming that that's why the changes were made. We don't know all the reasons the changes that were made. I don't know. There's been lots of rumor and report and this, that, and the other thing that are out there. My thing is, I just don't think she fired him on a whim. That's all. Is Chad Brinker culpable? Sure. Brian Callahan's culpable. Amy Adams Strunk is culpable. Everybody is culpable at 3-14. Okay. And like I said, if you want to fire them all, you can fire them all. I said this to Robbie though. I said, if you fire Rex Road, do you have to fire Robbie then too? No,
if you fire Joe because if you fire that show because the ratings stink, which they don't, but if the ratings did stink and you fired that show because of it, I mean, I think you probably would.
But you don't have to. You can think that one guy is ahead of the other guy and just say, hey, we're going to get him a new partner. I mean, it's possible.
But again, Brinker was a part of every decision. He was empowered in these decisions. Okay. He was promoted for these decisions. It's his AI injury model that led to L'Jarius Sneed and Lloyd Cushenberry and Chidobe Awuzie and Kenneth Murray and all the guys that got hurt. And again, so to me, when you promote Chad Brinker to czar of football and you say Chad Brinker's got the answers and we're going to change the model because now it's draft, develop, retain, which I think is so stupid. But now that's the model now, and Chad's operating it, and they're going to hold Brian Callahan accountable. Chad Brinker's going to hold Brian Callahan accountable, according to Burke Nihill. You're telling me that in this case, you see logic that Rand Carthon wasn't good enough, Brian Callahan might not be good enough, but Chad Brinker is good enough.
Well, listen, when you hire someone and you put them in place, you are going to tell everyone that they are good enough, that they are great, that they're this, that they're that. You're not going to set them up and say, you know, we fired Rand, but we're going to give Chad a shot to show he can do it. There was something about him in the way he presented himself, in the way he presented his knowledge and his plan that she believes in, that she no longer believes in Rand Carthon. I mean, that's why I say 3-14
what
is bad.
What does Corey believe in?
What do I believe in?
Yes, what does Corey Curtis believe in?
I believe that she lost faith in Rand Carthon. I think she's unhappy about the record, but more than anything, I think there was something about the way he did business that she didn't like. What that is, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. I'm not going to, but I do know this. People don't like to throw away money. So I don't think she's just throwing away money. Okay. I think there's a reason behind it. You know, did she make an emotional decision at a bad time when she fired John Robinson? Yes, she did. And you know what? Maybe she learned from that because, like I said, we were hearing mid-season that Rand could be in trouble, but she waited till after the season to fire him. So maybe she learned from that. That is my take, Jared. That is my take. My take was he was in trouble, and it didn't surprise me. And that doesn't mean everybody has to go. That's all. And other people have been fired. I mean, Anthony Robinson was fired, right?
Yeah, the Rand crew. The crew of alignment was fired. Yeah. And again, I reported it. Brinker wanted to fire Callahan too. And Amy said no.
Okay.
So
well, you know,
the entire alignment group minus Brinker's all out except for Callahan, who they're going to fire after this upcoming season. And I mean, Brinker is just, he just hangs the moon.
Well, he hangs the moon for now. Rand hung the moon last year.
And you don't have any problem with any of this?
Look, this is one person who was fired after 2 years. We're acting like she cycles through these guys like chiclets. John was on the job for what, 6-7 years?
I mean, she absolutely cycles through these guys like chiclets. What are we talking about? This is the third year in a row where we've sat here with some new management structure.
How long did she have John Robinson?
6 years, 7 years.
Okay. All right. How long did she have Rand?
2 years.
Okay. So she had one guy for 6 and one guy for 2. If she gets rid of Chad in a year or two, then she cycles through guys like chiclets. One guy she had for 6 years, another guy she had regret about after 2 and fired him. Okay. So that's not a trend. 2 years is not a trend. All right. 2 years is not a trend. 2 years is one guy out. Vrabel, you know, and I know she thought about firing Vrabel and Robinson at the same time, but she gave.
Well, that's what she says. I mean, who knows if that's what's true, but that's what's being bandied about. Okay.
We know what we believe. All right. And I believe she hung on to him another year to see if he could turn around because he'd won a lot of football games.
Do you trust Corey Curtis? Do you trust the Titans? When they say something, you know, Burke Nihill says something, Chad Brinker says something, Amy Adams-Strunk says something. At this point, do you believe them?
Well, what am I not supposed to believe?
That everything they said last year was true and now it's 100% not true?
Well, look, I believe they thought things were true and then they didn't happen. Okay.
So you think you think all those things Brinker said on that podcast about how great the Titans were and how great Rand was and how aligned they were and how they're like long lost brothers. You thought that was true in February, and now in January,
when you're talking
think that
about
Chad's had an epiphany.
I think when you are talking about PR and interviews, I think if you buy all of that all of the time, I mean, like if somebody asks you about Chase and 102.5 The Game during a podcast interview, what are you going to say?
I mean, I
Chase
think I would
great.
tell the truth.
I worked with Chase a long time. 102.5 has been committed to me forever. They're the best, blah, 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 blah. And then you know what? When you have a few drinks with your friends and they ask you about 102.5, you'll say the good stuff, and then you'll also say the stuff that bothers you.
But I think there's a difference between that and just like, I think there's a difference between, hey, you know, we got to all at least put on a united front. Wait, you know what? I take that back. Corey, I pride myself on being honest and accountable. Those are the two things that I truly hold myself to. Everything else I've learned in my life, I can't control. I can't control, knock on wood, if I get sick tomorrow and, you know, something happened. Like, I can't control that stuff. But yeah, I can control every day being honest and accountable. And there I was, if they came to me and they said, Jared, let's say this, they came to me and they said, Jared, the Titans want to leave 104.5 and they want to come to 102.5, but they'll only do it if you say good things about them. Then I'd say you need to go get another radio host, because that level of dishonesty is beneath me.
That's fine. I mean, we're talking about PR, though. You know, when you're doing an interview, like I said, when you're doing an interview about 102.5, you're going to be glowing about how great it is. I don't do
interviews about 102.5, but I know what you're saying.
But that's the only thing that's comparable to what
you're saying. Here's what you're saying. You're saying you would do this, and I'm telling you, I would not do. If I didn't believe that Rand Carthon was the greatest thing since sliced bread, I wouldn't get on a podcast and say it. He and Vrabel were aligned, supposedly. But did Vrabel ever drop to his knees the way that Brinker did and the other people did for Rand last year? Did Vrabel ever do that?
No, that's Mike Vrabel.
Because he's not going to do that.
Anybody. Not for anybody.
He's not going to, because it's beneath him. And if he did that, he'd probably still be the head coach of the Titans right now.
That's his personality. His personality is different. Some guys play ball. Some guys don't. You know that.
Right. But again, I guess the point I'm making here is I think there's a certain level. The thing about Vrabel and his passive aggressiveness, Corey, was that even though like Vrabel could be a real Richard, at the same time, Vrabel could not help himself from saying things that he probably shouldn't say, because that's just, he can't help himself, because he can't stoop to a level of dishonesty that I think Chad Brinker is fine living in.
Okay. I think we're talking about two different things. I mean, because I think what I'm talking about is just being a good company man. And what you're talking about is a direct targeted deception. And, you know, like I've said,
I think Chad Brinker's a con man.
I love Channel 2. I know. You said he's a snake oil salesman and a con man.
I think he is.
And if that's what you believe, then that is what you believe. I don't have any evidence that points me to that. And you know what? If he fixes the Titans in this offseason and gets them a quarterback who can play at a competent level and they can win 7 or 8 games next year, people are going to love him. And they're going to say, let Chad cook.
Yeah, I think that the honesty and accountability stuff does matter. If you're going to actually turn the team around, you're going to need to be honest and accountable. Like I don't think you can run a Game of Thrones operation and be the Super Bowl champion. I just don't think you can do it. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think.
Well,
you can
I mean, look.
That.
Okay, we've had Game of Thrones here before. All right, Mike Mularkey was the first Game of Thrones victim, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that really felt like it was super.
Oh, come
deceptive.
on!
I think everybody knew what was happening.
So everybody knew he was going to get fired no matter what, and Vrabel was going to be the head coach.
He knew that.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying the fans all knew that, because I still have fans telling me that they think it was because Mularkey wouldn't fire Terry Robisky, which is just a load of
people do
garbage.
believe that, which is so ridiculous. I mean, it's so
very naive. It's very naive. So the Game of Thrones started then, whether it was obvious or not. There was a backdoor deal to bring in a new head coach. All right, and which I'm going to guess is what happened to Jared Mayo up in New England. We'll see if that was indeed the case.
Well, here's what I think happened to him. I think what happened to him was Robert Kraft wanted to keep him on as defensive coordinator so that he wouldn't interview for the Carolina job. So he put in his contract.
But it was in his contract.
Would be the guy to take over for Bill. And then he didn't think that he'd fire Bill right away because I'm sure Kraft thought deep down inside, Bill is still he's still got it. And then it got to a point where he didn't have a choice but to fire Bill. And so
he
at
had
that
to give him a
point, I
job?
think, he put it in his contract. He was going to do it. And you can't put it in the contract and then take it away from a black coach. Just change my mind. And I put it in the contract, but I'm taking it away.
Color the coach is. If it's in the contract, it's in the contract.
Again, I don't think that Kraft thought he could get away with that. And so he signed him for a year and hoped it would go better, but it didn't.
He couldn't massage that situation properly.
That's a good one, Corey. What's your fireball hot take this week?
Oh, gosh. You know what? I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but college football has to be looking at itself in the mirror and saying, what is wrong with us? What in the hell have we been dragging our feet on this playoff for so long? The college football playoff is spectacular. Last night's game was amazing, and I am looking forward to tonight's game. I have enjoyed this college football playoff, and that includes round one. I have enjoyed this more than I have enjoyed any college football in the last 20 years. Meaningful games, meaningful drama, Game of Thrones. One man enters, one man leaves. Notre Dame has had to win 3 games against quality opponents to get to where it is. It's fantastic to watch. Ohio State has come up from the dead like the Undertaker and looks absolutely unbeatable, and the drama is incredible. And they're playing more games, so we're getting to see more of wonderful players and great coaches and getting to learn more about them because they're being thrust in front of us. The college football playoff is utterly spectacular. I just wish college football had realized this 10 years ago.
There have been 2 good games.
Oh, come on.
You mean to tell me that you think that this is more exciting than Clemson versus Alabama and the Deshaun Watson versus Nick Saban games?
Okay, well, that was you're talking about one championship game. Like, watching Ohio State get off the deck and do what they did to Tennessee and Oregon has been spectacular. Okay, to see Arizona State rally with Scatterboo and almost knock off Texas was unbelievable. The entire world outside of Notre Dame fans picks against Notre Dame. And
I'll just tell you this. Winning. I thought last night's game was entertaining. I thought it was some of the worst quarterback play I've ever seen in a championship.
It wasn't great quarterback play, but it was great football and great drama. I mean, it was
an entertaining game. To act like this is the best college football's been in 20 years. Really? Better than USC Texas in the national title game with Vince Young?
USC Texas is the best game I've ever seen. But we're talking now, how many games have I seen? I've seen 9. I've seen 9 games that matter. All right.
No, but normally you are really excited about SMU Penn State. Whoa, that was a game. Oh,
yes,
God.
I was excited. I'm excited about all of them because you know what I'm not excited about? I'm not excited to watch Virginia Tech play Miami of Ohio in the Weed Buster Bowl.
That still exists.
Absolutely nothing.
Corey Curtis, News 2, as always on the show. Corey, I have got to complain about you coming up next, so I have got to usher you to the side.
What did I do now?
Oh, I'm about to. It's not just you, but in large part, it's what you just said. We have to get to that next. Stillman and Company on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. I love you, Corey, but still 102.5 The Game. Plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. I use Hiller at my home. I renovated a room, and the first thing I did was I called Hiller. I've got an outlet I got to get figured out outside. Apparently 2 outlets are kind of tied together. Because I got a little bit of an older home that's been renovated. I'm going to have Hiller out here to say, Hiller, what the hell's going on with this outlet? And I know they'll get to the bottom of it. They are the best. They've been in business since 1990, and they're family owned and operated. And they've got 100% satisfaction. If happy you'll be here, the service is free. And I know that because I use Hiller myself. If you're not happy, they'll take care of you. HappyHiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller. Call the Happy Fish Truck today.
there's been talk that there's a split, that there are Carthon guys and there are Brinker guys. Sense I'm getting is that Carthon guys pretty limited. Anthony Robinson, probably the one Carthon guy in there, and Anthony Robinson's gone. He's fired the same day Robinson was fired. I think people in the building are pretty happy to see this direction go. I'm sorry if that's a hard truth that people don't want to hear. I think the building is behind this move. And I think the building being behind this move says something. If you care about the people in the building who are doing the grunt work. If you're doing the grunt work and this is what you want, does that count for something to you guys? It counts for something to me.
That was PK yesterday on his podcast saying the building is so happy that Rand Carthon got fired, which again is hilarious because I was told all year that the building was in lockstep and Rand was going to cook. And I got to tell you, Corey Curtis triggered me in the last segment. Ian, back me up on this. You've got the grid right in front of you. I was not going to complain about the Titans and the Game of Thrones, Tony Soprano style organization they're running in this particular segment. In fact, read off what's on the grid right now.
This was going to be about the draft.
Okay. So I was going to talk about the picks and all the... And then Corey Curtis on the show. I said, Corey, what are your thoughts on all this? Well, Amy wasn't happy, and sometimes you got to make a move, and so on. And there wasn't one shred of criticism towards the Titans. There wasn't one shred. It was like, no, hey, they were 3-14. That wasn't good enough. Right. But Brinker was a part of that. Was Brinker not a part of that? I thought Brinker was a part of that. Well, just because Brinker was a part of it doesn't mean that Amy looked at the record and blamed it on Brinker. You have to understand. But Brinker said, I've done everything. We've done everything, we've done everything right. We're aligned. And I'm like, I don't get it. But as far as I am concerned, I can't do this just constant. Oh yeah, no, it makes sense. Everything's smart. Everything is on. Everything's together. I can't do that. There's got to be some criticism in there. And now it's starting to be like, oh no, this is totally rationalized. In the Packer way, this is what's going to be. And this is going to be, I'm like, really? Everybody? Joe today was like, I'm starting to think that Rand didn't get stabbed in the back. I'm like, what? So maybe it's just me that's crazy. I don't know. I don't know. For whatever it's worth. Steve's up next. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Steve, go ahead.
Hello. Hey, Jared, man. Great show, man. Look, you're not crazy. And let me make it quick. I'm a diehard Titan fan. I thought I was the number one fan, but I'm like, you're the number one Titan fan. You don't go for it because you always go back to Malarkey, Robinson, Vrabel, Rand. And it's like, it's always a built-in patsy for stuff that goes wrong. And we just kind of, okay. I called for Rand's pink slip a long time ago. He wore that little T brand for his buddy's company, blowing smoke all day. They just play with our emotions. We're not a nationally famous fan base, and we get treated as such. But still, what I appreciate for you is this year's been like watching a funeral, a year-long funeral, and you're not standing for it. Don't stand for it. Keep it up, and don't stop. And Chad is on the clock, and that's all I got to say. Thank you.
I guess for me, I just want somebody to be honest with me. And I don't want these just moving narratives all the time. Again, last year was, you'll see. You will see. And I'm like, okay. I told people, I was like, I'm not buying this. I'm not buying the vibes in the building are immaculate. And Rand Carthon saying this was the most accurate draft board I've ever been a part of. And we got our first pick on every single one of these. And Chad Brinkers, we're all aligned. I'll tell you. I'll tell you, I wish our fan base could see. I wish. So it was all kumbaya. The season just goes right to pot. And now it's, oh, don't blame Chad. He didn't have anything to do with that. We have a new philosophy. What? What? And again, I find it to be dishonest. And I just want somebody to shoot me straight. You know, again, this is all about winning and losing. Predators stink, and then the Predators continue to stink. Eventually, Barry Trotz will get fired, and eventually, Andrew Burnett will get fired. And that's just reality of sports, and they know it. But I don't feel like they're dishonest. And that's what's driving me crazy. 615-737-1025. More of your phones on all of this. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game. Fireball whiskey. There's no better way to enjoy the snow at home if you're snowed in than to just pour a little Fireball some whiskey, watch a ball game tonight. That's right. It will warm you up with how cold it is outside. Fireball whiskey, it is the perfect way to ignite the night. That's right. Fireball cinnamon whiskey. Start your weekend off the right way by igniting the night with Fireball whiskey. Once again, goes down so smooth and it tastes so great. Ignite the night. Please do responsibly and be 21 years or older to enjoy. That's Fireball cinnamon whiskey.
I think I personally should have known it when, I remember last summer I was laying out kind of my training camp tours, and I was talking to another general manager, and I was kind of deliberating between going to the Titans and another team. And, I was talking to this general manager, and he said, well, why, what are you going to do if you go to the Titans? I said, well, I want to get down there and see Ran. I'd spent some time with Ran the year before that. And he was like, well, why aren't you going there to see Chad? And I I was like, well, I'm not specifically not going there to see Chad, but I thought it was interesting that he brought it up. And I was like, well, what's your perception of that? And he's like, well, Chad's the guy running the operation now. He's like, don't you want to go see the guy running the operation?
That was Charles Robinson on Robbie and Joe. So according to Charles Robinson, Chad Brinker was running the Titans last year. But now it's only Rand's fault and not Chad's fault that they were 3-14? Chad's going to lead them in a new direction? Like, again, am I the only person? Like, I must be crazy. I must be stupid. I must be just... Ian, I don't even know how I graduated from high school. Because everybody is looking at me like, yeah, what don't you understand, Jared? And I'm like, what? Like, so again, Charles Robinson said that Chad Brinker was running the Titans. When they put Chad Brinker on TV during the Seattle preseason game, with the infamous cut we loved playing, the service the head coach line, when they put him on TV, I'm like, they put him on TV. Why are they putting him on TV unless he's the boss man? I said, it sounds to me like they hired Rand Carthon, a babysitter. I said that, and I got raked over the coals. I'm in Toronto, and I'm just getting these text messages and tweets about, yeah, you're a racist. I'm like, wait a minute, what? So then Rand gets fired, and Charles Robinson's like, yeah, I mean, I was getting asked why I wanted to go talk to Rand. I should have wanted to talk to Chad. So Chad was in charge? So they went 3-14. That wasn't good enough. Amy has to change course. But the guy who was in charge, according to Charles, am I the only one that doesn't understand any of this? See, I'm serious. This stuff's making me crazy, I guess. I guess I'm stupid. I can't. There's no other explanation for this. Let's go back to your phones. Elliot is up next on the Titans. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Jared, 4 quick points. I live in Baltimore now. All of the people I know in Baltimore that are Ravens fans just ask, how could the Titans let this happen? How could Amy Adams Strunk let this happen? You're not dumb. You're not stupid. The people that lead this organization very clearly are. 2, Amy Adams Strunk needs to hire TJ Ducklow to run her comms because she obviously needs some help, not just running the organization, but messaging the organization. And I'll make it 3 points. Final one. How come we still have the same special teams coordinator? That's one of the worst special teams coordinators in the entire league.
Don't worry about the coaching staff. The coaching staff will change. I'm not worried about the coaching staff. Don't get worked up about the coaching staff. That stuff doesn't matter. Also, again, I think the Titans communications people are doing fine. I think they're doing their jobs, and I think they do them very well. And for me, like a communications person, it's like a tennis racket, right? The racket's only as good as the person using it. I mean, I know Arthur Ashe used to do commercials about, hey, get the tennis racket Arthur Ashe uses, and you too could win the U.S. Open, but that's really not true. When it comes to communications, you're only as good as the people that you're representing. And so, again, without going through in details, the Titans have a very good comm staff. So I don't, as far as that's concerned, and trust me, I probably piss those people off more than anybody else in the entire city because of how many problems I'm probably sure I caused for them. But again, I mean, my thing with all of this is it just feels like a constant moving of the goalposts. And I think deep down inside, we all want the same thing. We all want the Titans to be good. But I just seem to sniff out a lot of what I figure to be dishonesty. Here's what really bothers me. For about the last year and a half, I've called out things that I have seen. Like, I've just given you my honest opinion. When Diana Rossini said Vrabel was safe And I said, I don't believe the Titans because they lied about Mike Mularkey. It wasn't that I knew they were going to fire Mike Vrabel. It's just I didn't believe them. Like that did not sway me as, oh, okay, now Vrabel's safe for sure, because they'd already lied about it. So it was hard for me to forgive them there. When it comes to like, I hear these podcasts and I'm like, man, it sounds like Chad Brinker's blowing all this smoke on the Titans podcast. It's not that I know Chad Brinker's blowing smoke, but it sounds like it. And so I make a big deal about it. And then when all this stuff ends up coming to fruition, and then it's like, well, what, Jared, don't you understand that? I'm like, this is what I was yelling about. Everybody told me I was stupid then. And now you're telling me I'm stupid now. It doesn't. Somebody help me. Jordan says the Titans organization seems not only dysfunctional, but also dishonest. With that being said, is there any move besides the owner doing a much needed press conference that you believe would restore the credibility of the franchise? Because as it stands now, I don't know if even finishing the house cleaning would restore mine. I don't know. But let's just start. Forget about the owner doing a press conference. Let's start with the guy who's now the czar of football operations doing a press conference. 615-737-1025. So the Titans have completed 2 GM interviews. So now I'm going to stop yelling about the Titans, and I'm going to tell you, if I was interviewing for the GM job, knowing the players involved, here's how I think I would go about getting it. That is, if this is actually a real GM search. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, 1025 The Game, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Sorry, I was just a little distracted when we came back. I was texting Caroline something. Okay, so you heard in Ian's update. The Titans have interviewed Reggie McKenzie, the former Raiders general manager, former Packers executive with Chad Brinker, who is now an executive with the Dolphins, and Thomas Dimitrov, who is the current CEO of Sumer Sports. Thomas Dimitrov, former Falcons general manager. And let me say this again. I haven't given my full and total endorsement to Thomas Dimitrov for the job. In fact, I think that would hurt him if he was actually a legitimate candidate for getting the job. And he may be, he may not be. I don't know. I really have a lot of respect for Thomas Dimitrov. I have a lot of respect for what he did with the Falcons. I like Thomas. I think he's like all the other guys. He's got a little bull crap to him, but I think he's a good football guy. I think he's a good executive. And the old man thought he was a good executive too, so at least keep that in mind. But if I was applying for the general manager job, I think I would have a pretty good plan to be able to get it. And that is assuming that this is actually a job that is available and not just going to go to Chad Brinker's Packer buddies. So here's what I would do. And again, let me state on the front end, this is about getting the general manager job. And then the second part of it would be once you get it, then doing the job. Because what every politician will tell you is you can't govern if you don't win. So number one, when it gets announced, Dallas Cowboys Senior Director of Pro Personnel Jared Stillman is interviewing with the Tennessee Titans. Number one, I'd kiss Chad Brinker's ass, and I would talk about how lucky I am to have Chad in my corner overseeing equipment, field turf, IT, communications, security, and urinal maintenance. Chad, if it wasn't for you getting those new urinal cakes put in there, I don't know how this organization would operate. Thank you, Chad. You will allow me to focus on scouting, which is my bread and butter, which I wake up every morning wanting to scout ball. Thank you, Chad. And some of that's to butter up Chad, but it's really to butter up the other people in the room who clearly are obsessed with Chad Brinker, who clearly think in a 3-14 season in which the ball clearly did not bounce their way, that Chad Brinker can do no wrong. That's who I'm buttering up. Number two, I'd start with the quarterback. I'm sitting down. Again, Amy Adams Strunk is in front of me. Again, I don't know who all's in there. Amy Adams Strunk, Chad Brinker, Burke Nihill, Bryce Wasserman, Kenneth Adams, whomever. And I'd start with the quarterback and not Brian Callahan. If the edict from the organization was the same edict as last offseason, the alignment stuff, then it would start with Brian Callahan. But Brian Callahan might actually be the antagonist to the person they've labeled in charge, Chad Brinker, so I wouldn't get too far into aligning with Callahan. That was last year's message. It's like a clothing line. That was 2023. This is 2025. So I'd have a breakdown and a grade on Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. And it wouldn't be, oh, we've got a first-round grade on Cam Ward and we've got a first-round grade on Shedeur Sanders. No. It would be I would try to be as specific as possible. I see Cam Ward as the 12th best player in the draft. Here are the 11 players that I have above him, and I have him as 12. And I would compare him to whomever coming out, Jameis Winston coming out. Just because I want to show how prepared I am, how knowledgeable I am about the draft, the rankings, the quarterbacks, and what they do. I'd also have a breakdown of the 2026 quarterbacks available. Drew Aller, who, by the way, sucked last night, Garrett Nussmeier, etc. And in each instance, because again, draft, develop, retain, I talk about where these guys have to get better. Now that Garrett Nussmeier is going back to LSU, we are going to watch him this year, and we want to see if Garrett Nussmeier can improve XYZ. That's what we do. Then I would lay out the plan for each quarterback if we were going to draft them and how we would develop them. If we draft Cam Ward, here's our plan. Again, forget about Callahan. Callahan's on the hot seat. So clearly they're not totally happy with him when they're talking about we're going to hold him accountable and he needs to do better. He knows that. He's not the golden boy. So forget about Callahan. So if I'm sitting here talking about Cam Ward, I would bring up, well, if Cam Ward, I would want a different offense. If we're going to do this with Cam Ward, I want Shane Steichen's offense from Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts, or I want whatever. We're changing the talk there, even though Callahan's the coach. The reason being, again, I'm not trying to win over Brian Callahan. And again, I'm not even sure these people in this room support Brian Callahan. So I take each quarterback and I lay out how we're going to develop them. Then I'd have a list of the other offseason quarterback targets, starting at the very top with Aaron Rodgers, to Jake Browning, to Mac Jones, to Justin Fields, whomever. And I'd go through each one. And I'd say, here's our plan if Mac Jones is our quarterback. Number 3, I'd go through the draft. Forget about philosophy. Again, the philosophy they've already told you. Draft, develop, retain. Everybody has the same philosophy, and you know it. You want to draft the best players, and you want to have a superstar team. When it comes to the actual draft itself, and I'm trying to win these people over, they have the philosophy. I'm the one who has to execute it. So I'd have the board out, and I'd have potential trades mapped out. If we trade back with the Giants, here's what we'd want in return. If we trade with the Raiders, here's what we'd want in return, and here's who we'd probably take. For instance, if you ask me about a hypothetical trade with the Giants, I would say, okay, if we choose not to go the route of Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, and we're willing to do that, and we say, you know what, we're going to sign Justin Fields in free agency. And then if we get a quarterback in the draft, that's great. If not, we'll go into the year with Fields as our starter and Josh Johnson as the backup. And we'll see what we can do with Fields, but we're really going to try to build it around Fields. And here's the deal with the Giants. I'll give the Giants the first pick so they can take a quarterback. Cleveland takes a quarterback too. I get Travis Hunter. So I want 3, 66, and the Giants first in next year's draft, which also, I think, kind of matches up with the value of what that pick is on the chart. So when it comes to the draft, I'd have the whole board laid out, and I'd have potential trades with everybody. Okay, if we trade with the Raiders to move back to 8, we're going to need a lot more than what we're getting from the Giants because we're not going to get Travis Hunter. We're not going to get Abdul Carter. But can we live with Kelvin Banks and then all these other guys? I'd have a full breakdown of the top 100. Again, it doesn't have to be right. My top 100 doesn't have to actually match the top 100 players. We're trying to get the job right now. We're not trying to do the job. We're trying to get the job. So I want you to know that I'm as detailed as it comes to the top of the draft. I've already got potential trades mapped out so that when the Giants call after Shedeur Sanders' pro day, we know what we're willing to take. Not what we want, but we know what we're willing to take. And I'd constantly be talking up the 2026 draft class as if I have a clue. But here's what I know. Again, the people in the room, they don't. They don't have the first clue about the 2026 draft. Not even Brinker. So I would look at them and say, well, you know, the tackle class in 2026, the tackle class here, you know, Kelvin Banks at Texas, he might be a guard. Will Campbell's probably off the board with the 5th pick, but the tackle class in 26 is great. So we can sign these 3 veteran tackles that may reach free agency, or we can work on a pick swap to take care of right tackle because the 26, we're going to pick up an extra 1, but we move down. This, again, making it sound like, boy, I'll tell you, I really know the 26 class. And boy, would I talk up the 26 class. I tell you, that tackle class is great. Ian, do you know if the tackle class is great in the 26th draft?
No idea.
You know what? I don't think Amy does either. That's okay. Number 4, free agency and trades. I would talk about the successes I've had in free agency in the past, because the Titans are going to have about $100 million in cash to spend. And I know that Chad Brinker says we're going to be selective in free agency. They're going to spend money. They just don't want to sell free agency the way Amy did last year when she said, we've got a lot of cap space. You know, I just don't want to sell free agency as we're going to build the team in free. No, that's a bad word. But I would talk about how selective we were going to be in free agency, and I would use examples of teams I had been with in the past and how it had worked in free agency. And since I've never been with an NFL team, I'm going to use an example that I know intimately because I covered it, which was the 2016 Titans, which went from 3-13 in 2015 to 9-7. And I would talk about how, look, we didn't go out there and sign the top guard, Kelechi Osemele. We didn't go out there and sign the top defensive tackle, Calais Campbell. We didn't do any of that. But what we did do was we spent, and we really fortified the roster. The best move we made was a 4th-round pick swap with the Eagles for DeMarco Murray, because he fit what we were looking to do. And we knew DeMarco Murray was a great player, and he ended up being the AFC's leading rusher. And when it comes to rebuilding this team, because there are holes at right guard, at right tackle, at quarterback, at wide receiver, tight end, edge rusher, inside backer, safety. Like, we're going to need to find some of these guys like DeMarco Murray. They cost a little bit of money, but we're going to pick swap. We're not going to give away 3rd-round picks to go get players anymore. So I'd use that. I'd talk about, and hey, Rashad Matthews, a perfect fit at wide receiver for what we were looking to do. We didn't pay top dollar, but a perfect fit for what we were looking to do. Number 5, the coaching staff. Brian Callahan is the coach. But here are some other names to consider, big picture, of guys in the league that I know will be successful coaches. Again, we're all in on Callahan right now. Salute. But if we're not, here's my list. Again, are any of these guys good coaches? Doesn't matter. I'm just telling you, I've got this big list of people. Then when it comes to the coaching staff, that's where I'd get a little bit more detailed. Where this is where I'd be more focused on doing the job than I would be trying to win them over, because they can always overrule it. They can always say, hey, we love this, but we're not going to do that because we, Brian Callahan's coaching staff, we really like Colt Anderson or whatever. So I'd sit there and I'd talk about what I'm going to do with the coaching staff, or what suggestions I would make to Brian Callahan with the coaching staff. Number 1, I would be in favor of firing Denard Wilson. And I'm sure somebody there will fire Denard Wilson. Really? Well, here's what I'm thinking, guys. Brian is a smart guy, and I really believe that Brian, hey, we'll see what he can do at quarterback with these guys on offense. But I've seen the way the Rams have done it, Chad, the way that Matt LaFleur did it in Green Bay, the way is you get a veteran defensive coordinator and you farm out that side of the ball. So we're going to look at a veteran defensive coordinator. We're going to look at Vic Fangio, and we're going to look at Brandon Staley, and we're going to look at these old pawpaws. I know Staley's not an old pawpaw, but that's what I'm talking about. We're going to look at these old pawpaws that run the defensive side of the ball the way that Sean McVay had Wade Phillips when he got to L.A. And I'm going to say to Brian, what do you think about doing this? What about Lou Anarumo, who just got fired by the Bengals? How about that? On special teams, we're going to go get Tom Quinn, the guy that Amy knows, the guy that Chad knows, the guy that they know. Either that, or I'll go get Green Bay's assistant special teams coach, the guy under Rich Bisaccia. I'll go get that guy because Brinker, he loves them Packers. But I would go get a veteran special teams coach that we can just, you got special teams, we don't have to worry about it. And finally, I would talk about how the most important thing we have to do as an organization, again, know your audience and know what they care about the most right now. And what they care about the most right now are future draft picks. So I would talk about how we're going to get great players through the draft, but we must build up with 2025 picks and 2026 picks to do it, knowing that if we get multiple 2025 picks and multiple 2026 picks, we should be in great position to have a competitive team in 2027. And 2027 is just a random season that I picked. Wink, wink. And that would be my pitch. Now, if I were actually interviewing for the job, I'd sell some of that stuff a little bit more because I'd have it more researched, about what the top 100 looks like in the draft, other potential first-round trade possibilities, what I'm thinking about with the second pick in the draft that we have, etc. Because the more names I throw at them, the more they won't remember the second I walk out. But what they will remember is how much information I showed up with. And the most important thing is that I am selling the owner on 2027 and the picks in 2025 and 2026. And I'm selling Chad Brinker on options. If we go with a veteran quarterback and we trade back in the draft, here's option A, B, C, and D. If we draft Shedeur Sanders, here's option A. If we draft Cam Ward, here's option B. Because again, Chad Brinker wants me to do the work. He just wants to come in and pick the option. And that's what I would do to get that job. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. I know what the Titans will tell me, but I wonder what they'll actually do. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
I know Rand and I, we've had a lot of conversations just around philosophically how to build a football team, and we're just so aligned, he and I. And Rand talks about that he has this acronym: FIT, fast, instinctive, and tough football players. And I love that. I was like, man, I love that. That's kind of an identity of the team that you want to build. And because this league, I mean, you got to be big and fast. I mean, size and speed matters.
That was Chad Brinker last year. FIT. That was the exciting tagline. Now it's draft, develop, and retain. Draft, develop, and retain. Had somebody texting yesterday say, man, it's like corporate buzzwords. He says, I work a boring corporate job, and we have Zoom calls all the time where they talk about execution and management structures, and then we leave and go to the water cooler and talk about how stupid it all was. I did laugh at that yesterday when I saw that. So here's the thing that bothers me about the Titans and their general manager search. They interviewed Reggie McKenzie today. They interviewed Thomas Dimitrov. And again, I said, I like Thomas Dimitrov. I think he's a straight shooter. I think he's honest. And I think he's a good football guy, which is all I really care about. I think he'd be good with Brian Callahan. But again, I don't think they care too much for Brian Callahan over there right now. It's kind of like, well, we'll see with Brian Callahan, but, whatever. But there's one thing I have a really hard time believing, and that is that they're actually running a legitimate search. When Rand Carthon gets fired at 9:40 a.m., and it gets out there that he was fired at 9:40 a.m., and Paul Kaharski has a story ready to go at 11:40 a.m. about John Eric Sullivan from the Packers, it makes me think that there's really not much of a search going on as much as it is a confirmation search. This is the guy I want to hire, Miss Amy. All right, let's see. Now, we got to interview the other people because we can't make it look like we only wanted to interview one person. But I have a hard time believing that they're actually running a search. I have a hard time believing that Thomas Dimitrov actually has a chance to get this job. I have a hard time believing that Ian Cunningham has a chance to get this job, that Catherine Hickman from the Browns has a chance to get this job, that John Spytek from the Buccaneers has a chance to get this job. I really have a hard time believing that. Somebody told me, and this is why I know that Rand Carthon wasn't a DEI hire, as people will say, which I find to be very racist. Whenever I hear someone say, it was a DEI hire. What I was told was Amy Adams Strunk went to the accelerator program, which is what the NFL does for minority candidates that teams send to the accelerator program to meet with owners so that owners have it in their head that, hey, if I was ever looking for a general manager, this might be somebody I like. What I was told was John Robinson was the GM. Amy goes to the accelerator program. She heard Rand Carthon give a speech and thought, I like this guy. Now, look, we've all done that, where we meet somebody for the first time, we see somebody give a speech, we something and think, hey, this guy might actually be pretty good. Then we find out after doing a little more research, like, probably not so much. But Amy already knew from the accelerator program that she liked Rand Carthon. So did all the other people that they interviewed for the job. Malik Boyd of the Bills at the time, and I think Glenn Cook of the Browns, and these other people. Was it an actual search, or did Amy have her mind made up that, hey, she wanted to go with Rand Carthon? Again, they interviewed Monty Ossenford, who's done a good job, not a great job, but a good job, has done a good job in Arizona. Was he really on the table? Or did they just interview him to interview him? Mike Mularkey told the story about Ray Horton getting an interview for the head coaching job in 2016, and he knew he was getting the job because Amy had already told him, according to Mike Mularkey. So that's what makes it hard for me to take seriously about this is, one, I really don't know how much power the general manager of the Titans is going to have, though I was encouraged by that Jonathan Jones report at CBS about, hey, the league feels comfortable with this being a real GM position. That was a positive. But I also have a hard time believing this is a real search and that it's not just going to be Brinker's buddy from the Packers. Matt says, with all the Green Bay connections and with this Sullivan guy being talked about, do you think Aaron Rodgers might be coming here? I'll put it to you like this. People keep talking about Derek Carr. Derek Carr, this would be our guy, Derek Carr. Derek Carr's not leaving the Saints. Let me ask you a question. If the Saints get rid of Derek Carr, who's going to be the Saints quarterback? Derek Carr's good enough for you because you don't have a quarterback. The Saints get rid of Derek Carr. They don't have a quarterback. So Derek Carr's going to be on the Saints. So again, there's Daniel Jones. There's Aaron Rodgers. There's Mac Jones. There's Justin Fields. That's what you're looking at. If you trade out of the pick, which again, I think Brinker is making obvious he wants to do. We got to get a lot of picks. If you trade out of the pick, you're not getting a quarterback. It limits your options. I would not rule out Aaron Rodgers. 615-737-1025 here on the program. 615-737-1025 here on our show. Jason Fitz joins us up next here on the program. Stillman & Company, Fireball Hot Take Friday. It's 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company here on the program. One texter into the text line says, the guy the Titans need to look at is Cooper Rush. Played well as Dak's backup for $2 million. He's a UFA, and the Cowboys screwed him out of a $500,000 bonus. It's a shame Poo-Poo Johnson is not available. Again, as I said, 80% of the Titan, or 30% of Titan fans would convince themselves that Poo-Poo Johnson is this great quarterback. Let me say this. When we're sitting here saying, what about Cooper Rush? That's when you know you suck. Like, I'm just telling you. So that's the reality the Titans find themselves in. Plus, again, who knows with the people running it and this changing narrative. Last year, we were aligned, hunting together, and everything was great. And now it's draft, develop, retain. Be patient, fans. It's going to take some time, blah, blah, blah. Jason Fitz joins us on the program, Fox Sports Radio, Yahoo Sports, here as we get going. Fitz, let's start with this. Your reaction to the week that was in the days of our Titans.
Look, you got it part of the way right. Look, I only think, and we can address the quarterback conversation in a second, because I've obviously, as a fan of another team that needs a quarterback, I've been yelling and screaming about this for almost a year. But here's the thing. I think the best way to rip the Band-Aid off for any organization is to fully rip the Band-Aid off. And so, Rand Carthon being gone, that makes total sense to me. The hard part about it is, in my mind, why'd you keep Callahan? And to this, it comes down to, now you're telling me that you're either going to tie the hands of whoever you hire, or you're going to limit yourself to only hiring people that like the coach that you have. Those are both bad solutions in my mind. Like, granted, my favorite team, the Raiders, did it really poorly by letting Antonio Pierce go out to the podium and then firing him Telesco a couple of days later. I don't care how it went down. Ultimately, for me, I think the only way that you can truly create a new culture inside a locker room, create a new vision for an organization, is to get everybody gone and bring everybody in at once that has the same vision, the same common goal, the same understanding. It never works to me when we go halfway to halfway to halfway. Because now, whatever GM comes in, if Callahan stinks, it's like, well, he wasn't my coach to begin with, so let me hire a coach, and all of a sudden you're starting this weird revolving door that lasts for the next 5 years.
Okay, so you brought up bringing Callahan back. That's not my problem. My problem is making Chad Brinker the chief football decision maker, etc. Again, I don't know what this guy did to get the job, but he was Rand Carthon's first hire as the assistant general manager. Talked up analytics, and he talked about, how this gets promoted to president of football operations, but Rand's in charge. He does all these podcast interviews, or does the Titans podcast, about how aligned they are, how I just wish our fans could see how great Rand is. Rand this, Rand that. We're all aligned. We're all together. We're all everything. And then all of a sudden, Rand gets fired, and now this guy's leadership's the guy we should follow? I don't understand this. And now that some of the people in the media are telling me, no. Chad Brinker, he's got a better plan. He's got a Fitz. This feels like a Game of Thrones episode or something I'm watching. What do you make of that?
I know it's a power struggle. And I do think, without necessarily the Chad situation, but one thing I'll reference from today on Inside Coverage with Charles Robinson, one thing Charles talked about is how several organizations now have figured out what the Lions figured out. I can't believe we're sitting here saying the Lions are sort of the benchmark for quality run organizations, but they've become that. And one thing they did with their GM was essentially they went to their GM and they said, we're taking everything off your plate except for scouting, personnel, things like we're going to handle, and somebody else is going to handle the analytics. Somebody else is going to handle the cap, and we are only going to ask you to do what old school GMs used to do, just evaluate talent at every level. So I do think that we're seeing more and more teams have a split and a divide in how they do that. It seems to make a lot of sense. Like, we went from an era where coaches wanted full control to, GMs want full control, to now it feels like you've got a GM that's in charge of one thing, and you've got a president of football operations that's really running a logistics side of this whole business. I have no problem with that portion of the split. But again, I think your Game of Thrones analogy is kind of right, because at its core, when things start to go wrong in every bad organization, it doesn't become about fixing it. It becomes about protecting your job. And so how do you trust anybody that's been in there to be honest about the failings when the fact is they've all failed? When you have the first pick in the draft, it's because your team was that bad. And it's oversimplification, but we have to remember. And look at over the course of the last 15 years, how many teams that had the number one pick in the draft for any reason other than injuries to superstars the year before have really ever turned their organization around. Like when you are so bad,
right
you
now?
pick first overall.
I can answer this question for you. Since 2010, the only team, the only coach who has survived 2 seasons after earning the number one pick in the draft is Zach Taylor in Cincinnati. Every other coach has been fired.
And to that point, I think part of what we have to understand is that there is no Joe Burrow in this draft, right? Like I just loudly want to scream that this is I'm sorry, like I would love to be a beacon of light for you, but I've been screaming the same thing to the Raiders organization, to fans for almost a year. This is a terrible year to need a quarterback. This is a terrible year to have the first overall pick in the draft and need a quarterback. So the part of the reason that the Bengals were able to turn it around, is Zach Taylor a world-beating coach? I don't think so. But is Joe Burrow an elite quarterback? Heck yeah. So, like, things got a lot easier for them when they got Burrow, and then because Burrow was hurt, they got Jamar Chase the following year in the draft, right? So, like, just look at the pieces that were put in place here and just understand. I'm sorry, this is a terrible draft. I've been covering the draft since 2017 professionally, right? Like, this is not a good year to have the first pick. So now you're bad, and there isn't a franchise saver at the top.
So to your point on that, Jason Fitz is with us. I don't like any of these quarterbacks. And I hear people talking up Cam Ward, and I hear people talking up Shedeur Sanders, and I think Cam Ward is too reckless with the football. It felt like Cam Ward did not play well enough against average competition in the ACC this year for me. And I don't think Shedeur Sanders played anybody who was any good this year except BYU, and they smoked them. Again, I haven't analyzed every throw they've made. I'm not a fan of either guy. And with that being said, if you were asking me personally about the draft, I would tell you straight up, look, I think Travis Hunter's a difference maker. I'm not sure any of these other guys are. You've got the first pick. I would tell you that right now, if you said, Jared, with the first pick, gun to your head right now, what do you want out of it? I would say I want the best player, and I think it's Travis Hunter. And I really don't think there's much of a discussion to that. Am I crazy with what I just threw in front of you?
Nope. The Raiders had the first pick, 3 weeks ago? And when they won the game that got them out of that pick, the number one thing that I told everybody that kept blowing my phone up saying, oh, bet you're bummed is nope. Because in a normal draft, Shedeur and Cam would be picked at or near the bottom of the first round. Again, I will stress that every single person I've talked to scouts, I've talked to draft analysts, I've talked to people that have covered this a long time. And I'm not talking about every bum that's on social media yelling stupid thing. I've talked to the smartest people that I know that help me every year for draft content. I've asked them all the same question: where would Cam and Shedeur rank in last year's draft? The answer I've gotten, the highest answer I've gotten was barely ahead of Bo Nix. The lowest answer I've gotten is below Bo Nix, right? So the fact is, if you listen to Mel Kiper and Field Yates on their draft podcast this week, Kiper stressed the fact that J.J. McCarthy had a much higher draft grade for everybody than either of these quarterbacks. There are fatal flaws. I am so, like, my team as a Raiders fan, and I'm only prefacing this for anyone that doesn't remember that part of my life, but for my favorite football team, I'm the most dire situation I've ever seen in my life at quarterback, and I'm so thankful they're not picking first. Even though you would think that that's the one thing I want, man, I don't believe either of those guys are franchise savers, and I believe they're going to go 1-2. And that's the hardest part about all this is, like, we're all so desperate for a quarterback. If your team stinks so bad that you are taking a quarterback right now in this year's draft, if you're the Titans, you have so many talent issues. I think you're right. Take best player available and understand for once, like, if everybody's asking the fan base to have patience, then have some understanding of, okay, we're going to take the best player available because next year's draft class of quarterback is widely considered to be better, right? And we all knew last year in the draft that it is. Like,
Drew Aller sucks, dude. Like, I watched him last night. He blows.
I'm not a huge Drew Aller guy. Like, I think he showed a lot of his youth and accuracy, but I will say this, Stillman, like, we can argue about next year's class. It absolutely 1,000%. Last year going into the draft, there were teams that told us when we were doing our draft prep that they were prepared to move up in last year's draft because they knew this year's draft at quarterback was weak. That's real. So, like, they've known that Shedeur and Cam and what they thought at the time could be Quinn Ewers desperately or Carson Beck desperately. And those guys turned out to be so iffy that, like, Carson Beck's already transferred. Quinn Ewers has an NIL offer. Like, It's stunning to see how bad this year's quarterback draft class is. Like, I don't even think there's a Zach Wilson in this year's quarterback class. Like, I don't think either of the guys that are going to go 1 or 2 are going to be starters. And if you want to take a flyer later in the draft on Jackson Dart because you just feel like taking a flyer, fine. I don't care. But if you're sitting there with the first overall pick, I think you have a responsibility to take the best player available. And the best player available in this year's draft is clearly Travis Hunter. It's not even close. Like, it unfortunately for the Titans, because it is such a bad quarterback class, you're not even going to get a great offer to move down either. So, like, it's just bad luck to be bad in a year where the draft looks bad. If my favorite team traded out of the first round completely this year, I wouldn't care.
Do you think Cleveland's at 2? It looks like they're going to go quarterback. The Giants at 3. It looks like they would love to go quarterback. So I ask you this question. If you put the first overall pick up for sale, would you get a taker that would go all in to get that pick to take a quarterback? Is there a team desperate enough to take one of these quarterbacks?
So the people I've talked to have made it clear that you could get an offer, but it won't be a great offer. The test that everybody sort of has in their mind is what the 49ers gave up to move up Trey Lance, which was obviously a terrible trade, but we understand that. The consensus I've gotten, Field Yates mentioned this on his podcast. I've talked to a couple other people about the same thing. It'd be a fraction of that. Like, the quarterback class this year is not worth mortgaging your future over. So can you move up? Yeah, I think the best chance that frankly that the Titans would have would be convincing the Giants they have to move up to 1 and then allowing themselves to fall to 3 where they can still take Travis Hunter. That would be the dream scenario. But man, I don't think I think what you're going to see too, and the other part of this that makes it really complicated is the free agent class this year is dreadful. And look, guys, I believe the Vikings are going to franchise. They're going to franchise Darnold, and they're going to keep J.J. McCarthy. So, like, none of that's going to hit the open market. So I think we can just shut that conversation down. They can easily, because of the cost on the rookie deal, they can easily afford to keep the rookie. They will keep the second-year player now in J.J. McCarthy. And in the meantime, they can franchise their quarterback, because why not push the decision down the road a year? You can afford to do that. So I think what's interesting is that the Giants may have to leverage something to try and move up, but for what? Like, I mean, we're all looking around now saying, my God, like, who is going to be the starting quarterback for some of these teams that are desperate at that position? And there is not a quality answer anywhere.
Okay. Do you think the Giants would do 3, their first rounder next year, and 66 for the first pick? And remember,
no.
If you make that deal, you jump Cleveland. You don't just get one of the 2 quarterbacks. You get the quarterback you want.
You'd be giving up. Oh, man, that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, I think the Giants, as much as they would eat egg on their face, they could get J.J. McCarthy. If they really wanted to, they could try and get J.J. McCarthy for cheap. I don't think the Vikings would trade him, but I think they could try and make that deal to get J.J. McCarthy for cheaper than that at this point. So I don't think so. I think that's a lot. That's just I struggle to see anybody that's going to give up more than an additional pick to move up.
So you're saying, like, if I called the Giants and the Giants are at 3 and I wanted to move from 1 to 3, that I'd be looking at their second round, 35 or whatever would probably be what I would get, and that's it.
Yeah, I think you get a first. You get this year's first and the second. Maybe you get this year's first and next year's first. Even that's a lot to pay for all of these teams that have clearly acknowledged their rebuild mode. Even if you want to say that
the Giants are not saying they're in rebuild mode. The owner just said he's not patient.
Yeah, I know. Correct. But he also kept everybody in a year that, frankly, has a very weird head coaching class, too. Like, this is not a great year to need a head coach either. I will die on the hill that part of the reason some of these bad teams have kept their people at GM and at head coach is because this isn't a great hiring cycle for either of them. Like, so I think what you're seeing right now are a lot of bad teams are like, well, shoot, might as well just run it back and then we'll figure it out when we have better candidates in a year. It's a tough spot for the number of bad teams there were in the NFL this year. There's too much bad and no easy fix. So, no, the Giants are not going to sit here and admit that they're in rebuild, but I think the Giants are also sort of admitting they don't have an easy solution to getting better right now. So why make change when you're just going to turn around and suck for another year? I think the Giants were admitting basically they're going to do all of this next year by keeping everybody.
Jason Fitz, as always, on our program. Fitz, great stuff.
Appreciate you, brother. Happy New Year.
Absolutely. Jason Fitz, as always, joining us. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. How good of a wide receiver can Travis Hunter be?
He can be elite. He had 94 catches at receiver. And when you watch how he makes those catches, it's pretty spectacular. I mean, he's a smooth runner. He's got great acceleration. He's got strong hands. And because he plays defense, he knows what messes with defenders, which means how to set up his routes, how to get open, how to read what a corner's doing and use his technique and his assignments against him. then the flip side is true as well, because he plays offense. He knows as a corner what receivers are trying to do to him as a defender to set him up. And so he can read those things and jump, get the jump on routes and things like that. But you're right that an elite receiver makes a big difference. Just look at Jamar Chase in Cincinnati. Look at Neighbors with the Giants. And these guys, an elite receiver makes a big difference. But elite receiver will probably get the ball 6-7 times a game, 8 times a game, whereas a corner can affect every single pass play. And when you say that a great pass rush helps make your defensive backfield better, that's true. But a lockdown corner gives your pass rushers a beat more time to get to the quarterback.
That was Trevor on the program talking about Travis Hunter. And so, again, it's January 10th. I don't even know who the general manager of the Titans is going to be. I don't even know how much the general manager of the Titans is going to do. So it's hard for me to really have an opinion as to here's what the Titans need to do. But I am also aware of how sports radio works. And all people want to talk about, Jared, what are we going to do with the first pick? Again, who's making the first pick? Is Chad Brinker making the first pick? Is Amy making the first pick? Has Amy said, I want a quarterback? Period. If that's the case, you're drafting the quarterback. I mean, that's just how this is going to work. So again, I have not done a deep dive into the 2025 NFL draft, and that does include with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. I have question marks about both of them. I think Cam Ward's a little too reckless with the football. And I question the competition that both of them played. Now, Cam Ward did light up Florida, so I'll give him that. But, I mean, I really would have liked to see Shedeur go up against Arizona State. I really would like to see one of these two guys go up against Ohio State. Don't have that. So you'll have to do the best you can. Again, the Bills were able to make their assessment on Josh Allen. He played at Wyoming. So it doesn't mean that just because of the competition doesn't mean that they're not. But I'm just going to tell you this right now. The gift that we all get for having sat through that horrendously abysmal season is the number one pick. And I'm told this is a very weak draft. And I am told that in this very weak draft, there is probably one or two elite players. Blake Bedingfield at paulkaharski.com wrote that the two elite players in this draft, and Blake is the former Titans director of college scouting that convinced them to draft Derrick Henry. Blake says the two are Will Johnson, the corner at Michigan, and Travis Hunter. And says that if the Titans were to draft Travis Hunter, he would be the top corner on the team tomorrow. Now, where I sit, I would play Travis Hunter at wide receiver. And you heard Trevor say he thinks that Travis Hunter can be elite. And we're talking about elite at wide receiver. We're talking about Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase. Again, you're not going to be a Super Bowl champion just because you have a receiver. But we saw how much not having A.J. Brown hurt. So I would draft Travis Hunter, and I would stick him at wide receiver. And my question is now, okay, how do I get my cake and eat it too? How do I get Travis Hunter and get more draft picks? And the reality is you got to make sure that the Giants and Cleveland are going to take quarterbacks if you trade with the Giants. And then you have to make a fair trade with the Giants, which to me, according to the draft chart, would be this year's one, next year's one. This year's one is 3. This year's one, next year's 1, and 66. That way you're getting the best player in the draft, which you deserve for having the first pick. You're getting the best player in the draft, Travis Hunter. You're getting an impact player next year, and what should be a starter with a top 100 pick in the Giants' third rounder. But I start, before I get into diving into all the other players, whether it's Abdul Carter, who did look very good last night, before it's Abdul Carter, or Will Campbell, the tackle out of LSU, or whomever, I start with Travis Hunter and work out from there. Because it sounds like, according to everybody, Mel Kiper, Trevor, Fitz. It sounds like Travis Hunter is the best player in this draft. Why would I want somebody else to have the best player? Wouldn't I want the best player? 615-737-1025. Chad Withrow joins us next. His reaction to the week that was with the Titans. Is he buying what the Titans are selling? We'll do that next. I'm going to Company 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Beat Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Chad Withrow joins us, as he always does, from Outkick here on the program. Chad, what a week it's been. The Titans have managed to unite the fan base against them. The Titans, we had the two separate factions. We had the stability crew and we had the clean house crew, and the Titans found a way to thread the needle perfectly to piss off truly everybody on Tuesday. Chad Brinker is elevated to the czar of football. Brian Callahan stays, and Rand Carthon is out. What do you make of it?
Well, let's start by saying there's not a lot of Chads in position of power. So I do want to be respectful to my fellow Chad and Chad Brinker and congratulate him on rising to the top of this Titans squid game that's going on. And he's done so successfully. So now he is the survivor, and he is the one that's on top of everything. So congrats to my fellow Chad on making that happen. I'm with you. You know, it's like the scene in Braveheart where Mel Gibson is talking about uniting the clans and bringing all of Scotland together against big bad England. I think you're right, Jared. This is a situation that has united all the factions of the Titans fan base, and the Titans fan base in a weird way has never felt stronger than they do right now in disapproval of decisions that are being made at the very top by Amy Adams Strong with ownership of this team. Because it's once again a case where the Titans have just split the baby in half. You know, they had problems before and they get rid of John Robinson when they get mad and leave Mike Vrabel. Well, now it doesn't go well, so let's fire Mike Vrabel because he wants too much control and he's not going to cooperate with everyone, and then bring in Rand Carthon. Well, okay. Rand Carthon, Mike Vrabel doesn't work out. Vrabel gone. Now Brian Callahan comes in. Now let's get rid of Rand Carthon. So is Chad Brinker next? Or is there ever going to be a time where it's just a clean sweep of get rid of who's in place and bring on everyone else?
Chad Brinker's already told you who's next.
One where I think it's one where everybody has united behind that they don't like how this was all done. And I think everybody's united behind the idea that they hate whoever, you know, gave the info to Paul for his story about Rand Carthon being lazy and Rand Carthon sleeping on planes and all that. That seems to be pretty universal as well.
Okay, so they've already told you who's next. When Bert Nihill said that Chad Brinker, they're going to hold Brian Callahan accountable in the TD article at ESPN.com, they've already told you who's next. Callahan's next, which is wild to me. I mean, here's what's wild to me, Chad, and I cannot get over this. Now, I am being told, and I heard Joe talking about it this morning, and that Chad Brinker didn't stab Rand Carthon in the back, which I do have a problem with. I'm not shedding any tears over Rand Carthon's dismissal. I'd have done it yesterday. But I do have a problem with just this blatant dishonesty. But I'm told he didn't do that. I'm told he didn't stab him in the back. And yet we've played the audio clips all week of Chad Brinker last year talking about, boy, I tell you, Rand and I, we're so aligned. I wish you could see how great Rand is. He's going to do great things in this league. Rand Carthon and I are so aligned on the same page. We got this acronym FIT. I'm like, that's what we're all about, etc. And I hear all of this. And now everyone wants me to believe that Chad Brinker had nothing to do with this 3-14 season, and that Chad Brinker is the answer and not part of the problem, when again, everybody last year told me he was a big part of being one of the leaders of the turnaround. And I find that to be so dishonest and disingenuous, Chad.
Yeah. And also, normally we talk about with great power comes great responsibility. But in this case, how did Chad Brinker rise to a point where he has all the power in decision-making and everything and almost none of the risk? Because I'm with you. I feel like he could always pawn it off on whoever the GM is that he hires, or Brian Callahan. Hey, we provided a good roster for this guy, and it didn't work out because of the coach. It's just it's a very unique setup, and I don't think the Titans are in a position to reinvent the wheel of how NFL teams are run. First off, let's start here. The definition of a general manager. If I say general manager in the National Football League, everyone has an idea of what that was. Your former co-host, Floyd Reese, he was a GM. That's what a GM does. They pick players, they bring in free agents, they decide not to pay guys when the time comes, and the coach coaches the team. That's the traditional role of a GM in the NFL. This GM role for the Titans, it's not even a big deal. It's a director of scouting. Basically, the new GM is going to be over the scouts. They're going to get all the information. They're going to curate everything that's out there. They're going to give it to Chad Brinker, who's going to make the decision. That's it. But Chad Brinker has none of the ability of making the picks and if it doesn't work out, eventually getting fired. That's the way it looks to me. Now, maybe Brinker is next in line. I don't know if things don't go well this time around, but I can't think of a situation like this where someone has all the power but none of the risks when they're employed by someone else. And look, if you're aligned with someone powerful, you're at their discretion, right? They're going to make a choice. At one time or another, Amy Adams Strunk chose Mike Vrabel over John Robinson. And then she chose Chad Brinker over Rand Carthon. Who's she going to choose next? I don't know. I mean, I think anybody's guess is as good as mine about what's going to happen next with her, because it's all about who's in favor. Remember what Burke Nihill said about Amy has empowered me to talk about the business side, and Amy has empowered Chad to talk about the football side. That's why Amy doesn't speak. That's a heck of a lot of power, right? I mean, that's a heck of a lot of power. They are the mouthpiece of the owner. So if you're in that well with the owner, how much risk is there? How quickly can you fall out of favor? I think the answer to that question is no one knows with Amy Adams Strong.
Do you think Chad Brinker's the answer to the Titans' prayers?
I think the answer to the Titans' prayers is Kenneth Adams taking over for Amy Adams Strong. Let me put that out there right now. That's the answer. I think Kenneth Adams is competent. I think he's worked at different levels of the organization. That's not likely to happen. But, everybody's like, hey, sell the team. I'm thinking it wouldn't even need that. If Kenneth Adams ran the Titans, it would be so much more businesslike and a competent organization. That is the answer to the Titans' prayers. Is Chad Brinker the answer to the Titans' prayers? Absolutely not, by what we've seen. How could anyone claim that he is? I don't know. Chad Brinker might be really good at his job, but he has given no evidence of that here with the Titans. In a short amount of time, granted, but no, he's not the answer to the Titans' prayers. I have no evidence to suggest that he is.
What do you think about this idea, Chad Withrow, that Rand was the problem and now they've gotten rid of the problem and they're on their way? I mean, I wasn't a Rand Carthon fan. I thought he was dishonest, and that drove me crazy. And when, Paul wrote the story about how Rand was, again, and I'm paraphrasing the entire story, Paul wrote a story that said Rand was lazy. I had been saying that for a year and a half from what I had heard inside of that building. So that's no surprise to me. I don't feel like Rand did the job. And yet at the same time, it's like none of that was true for 2 years. Rand was great. Rand was awesome. You'll see Vrabel was the problem. We're all aligned. Rand's got these relationships. Rand's the best. And then 5 minutes after Rand gets fired, it's, oh, by the way, Rand was lazy. What do you make of that?
Well, I'll start here. When it's as bad as it is right now with the Titans, just from an on-field standpoint, 2,500 people in the stands for the game at the end of the year, first overall pick. When you've reached rock bottom, which the Titans are at right now, everybody's a problem. Let's start there. Everyone is the problem. Every single person. I don't want to hear when I talk about how bad Will Levis is, oh, Will Levis isn't the problem. It's the offensive line. Everyone's the problem. Will Levis is the problem. The O-line's the problem. The defense is the problem. Leadership is a problem. Don't tell me about Jeffrey Simmons being this great Newt Rockne type leader on a team that's this bad. If you suck, everyone is a problem. So Titans fans need to get that through their skulls right now. Everyone's a problem. So now that we have that understanding, then you can start to dive into, okay, how can we correct the fact that everyone's a problem? who's the most to blame? Where can you really course correct what you've been doing and how things have gone down? I mean, it starts at the top, right? Ownership's not going to change. Forget about it. So Chad Brinker's got to pull this together. He has got to pull off wise decision-making, and he's got to get this thing headed back on the right course. And then it's on Brian Callahan. We're going to find out how good of a coach Brian Callahan is. He was really bad in year one, really bad. Is he going to be better in year two? He needs a quarterback. Well, who's the quarterback going to be? Do you love Cam Ward? Do you love Shedeur Sanders? Maybe they can be the answer to that problem. But I get sick of whenever someone presents a problem, the response from Titans fans being, oh, he's not the biggest problem. This is the biggest problem. I saw a tweet from Terry McCormick that I still laugh at. That's like, here's on the list of things that are more important and a bigger problem than the quarterback. No, there's no bigger problem on the roster than your quarterback turning it over willy-nilly. There's no bigger problem. Stop it. It's all a problem. Everything. And until everyone can understand that, there's no progress forward. So I think the moment the organization gets that through their thick skulls, then you can actually move forward and start to have a competent football team and be a serious NFL organization. Jared, right now they're not. And that really saddens me.
Do you think this is a real general manager job that they are interviewing for?
No, it's a director of scouting. Don't even call it a GM. Chad Brinker is the president of football ops. I looked it up. John Elway, I think his title was president of football operations / general manager when he was with the Broncos. He was the guy. That's Chad Brinker. The moment Burke Nihill, I think it was Burke Nihill in that long deal from Jim Lyon that had a lot of quotes in it.
Did you notice that everybody got a quote in there? Like, did you need everybody to have a quote in there? Couldn't you have taken the Burke Nihill quotes and just attributed it to Amy?
Yeah, I like Burke Nihill, and I mean, yeah, he can be quoted in that. He's very high up in the organization, right under Amy. But I mean, there were so many quotes there. At some point, I was almost surprised I wasn't quoted in the press release on the Titans. That's how many quotes were in there. But I think it was Burke Nihill, who said he gets the final on roster. Okay, he's the GM. It maddens me to think about how they don't understand what a general manager is. And they're trying to rewrite the playbook on what a GM does. The Reggie McKenzie role that he interviewed for, or whoever they end up hiring, the woman from Canada they hired, they interviewed, whoever they hire, it's a director of scouting. It's not a GM. It's the head of the scouts. They are going to be the one in charge of presenting all the information of all the college prospects, all the free agents, and submitting it to Chad Brinker, who will make the final call. Chad Brinker is the GM. This is not a traditional general manager role.
Do you think this is a real search, or do you think we're going to end up with one of Brinker's Green Bay buddies?
I mean, but again, let's go back to that first question you asked before. It's not a general manager, so it's going to be whoever Chad Brinker wants to work with him. So who's going to provide Chad Brinker with the knowledge, the info that he wants? I mean, you almost need a note taker, right? Like you want a scribe that can put things in the vocabulary and the language you wanted. So that's who he's going to hire. This is not, I mean, the only thing I'm interested in, Jared, is the press conference when the GM is hired. It's not in the GM. The GM is the head of scouting. And I'm not trying to diminish that role. That's an important role in an organization, but it's not a general manager. So I don't even care to hear from the GM. If Chad Brinker is at that press conference, I want to hear from Chad Brinker. I think 90% of the questions should be for Chad Brinker and not the GM hire.
Chad Withrow with us from Outkick here on the program. The hot seat awaits next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, Chad Withrow with us on the program from Outkick. Chad, do you have a thought or do you want to go right to the hot seat?
Let's get to it.
Number one, what did you make of last night's game? 1, more of a Notre Dame win, or 2, a Penn State loss?
It's more of a Notre Dame win, and I'm really impressed with Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman has done the unthinkable and made Notre Dame truly likable across the country, because it is maybe the most divisive program in America. When you say Notre Dame, everyone's got an opinion, like the Dallas Cowboys. And I think he's made them pretty universally likable with this group. So he's done a great job. On the James Franklin Penn State front, I think all these things are true. He's done a great job. There's something to be said for winning almost every game, pretty much every game that you should win on your schedule. And he's got a hard time closing the deal. He's got a hard time getting over the hump against really good Ohio State teams or Michigan teams, or in a game where he's a slight underdog. He's not winning those games. But he's rarely an underdog because he's got the program in a very healthy place where they're favored in almost every game. So he's still going to have that knock of not being able to win the big game because they went through SMU and Boise State and got a very favorable draw, but he still got to the semifinals. When we look back 10 years from now and see who made the Final Four of college football in different years, we're going to see Penn State in there, and no one's going to care who they beat to get there. But people are going to continue to care that he can't beat the big teams in the big moments in the big games. I think all these things are true about him.
Can I tell you why I think Notre Dame's actually likable right now? Because I think this is the first time in my life that Notre Dame is under-promised and over-delivered.
Well, and they under-promised because they lost in Northern Illinois.
Yes.
Like, to me,
and they didn't start the year ranked number 2 in the country.
Right. They went to, but it was such an odd start because the biggest game we wanted to see was that night game on ESPN or ABC, wherever it was, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Mike Elko's debut, Notre Dame coming south, playing an SEC team. Notre Dame looked impressive in that game, won. The next week, they lost at home to Northern Illinois. And suddenly there's so much chatter about Marcus Freeman. The coach at Northern Illinois said that he offered to talk to Marcus Freeman about what he saw in their tape and how they beat them. I mean, it was a low point. And since then, they've just destroyed everyone and gone on this run in the playoffs. And I think Marcus Freeman's going to be a hot name in the NFL. So I'd watch out for that, too. If he wants an NFL job, I think he's going to get one here pretty soon. So I've been very impressed with them. But I think that Northern Illinois loss is what really reset our expectations with Notre Dame. And that's why they've sort of, as you said, they've over-delivered based off of what we thought of them after that game.
Number 2, do you see what the draft gurus see in Penn State quarterback Drew Aller?
I mean, I do, and I don't. And last night's a good example. There are some throws that he'll make, and I'm like, man, he just looks so smooth, getting rid of the ball, throwing it to the boundary, accuracy, and then he makes that decision. And by the way, I was watching the game with buddies, and one of my friends said, oh, you got to just take an inning and go to overtime. And I'm thinking, there's 50 seconds left, and you got to get a field goal to win it. They get 12 yards on first down. Like, I'm fine with them throwing it around, trying to get in position to kick a field goal to win the game in regulation. Drew Aller just made a terrible mistake. He forced it. He went through 2 progressions. He talked about it and got pressured and threw a terrible pick at the wrong time. So we saw the good and bad with Aller in that moment.
I mean, my thing was the interception that got called back for the pass interference. He threw that ball into triple coverage.
Oh, that was
I'm like,
and that
what
was
are we
also
doing?
a terrible pass interference call. Because pass interference, it's just like, here's the other one. It's so subjective on pass interference and holding. There were 2 just obvious holds. And I'm thinking they don't even show it on replay when it happens most of the time on a broadcast and go to whoever the rules expert is to show it. Oh, is this a hold? It's just so obvious and just someone decided not to throw the flag, even though they saw it. I feel that way about pass interference half the time. And that was such a poorly thrown ball into triple coverage. You don't call that pass interference. I'm sorry. I had a big problem with that call.
Next one. Is Quinn Ewers any good?
We're going to find out. I think we're going to find out a lot more about Quinn Ewers tonight. Yeah, I think he's good. I think Texas is a team built on defense. I think a lot like Tennessee this year. I don't know that we really know much at all about Nico. He had some good moments, but they never really relied on him or had to because their defense was good. Texas is the same way. Now, Quinn Ewers on that fourth down play made a terrific check at the line of scrimmage in a play against Arizona State. So he's a lot like Drew Aller. He shows flashes of, man, this guy, top 5, top 10 pick in the NFL draft. And then there's other times you just kind of meh with him. So it's a little bit of both. But yeah, I think to answer your question, yeah, he's very good. Is he great? I don't know.
Number 4, if you were on the clock today and nobody called, would you take Travis Hunter or one of the 2 quarterbacks?
I would take a quarterback. I mean, to me, the not taking the quarterback route is you trade back and you get a ton of picks and you get next year's number 1 for some team.
But I just said if nobody calls.
If nobody calls, that's what I'm saying. That's the only way I'm not taking a quarterback. I'm not taking Travis Hunter number 1 overall. If I'm sticking and picking a number 1, I'm taking a quarterback. Hands down, no discussion. I don't know if it's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, honestly. I haven't made up my mind yet on those 2 guys, but I am taking a quarterback. The Titans have to get a quarterback. You can put it off all you want, and that's the only way you put it off is if you trade back and you're going to get a top 5 pick again next year, and then you go get your quarterback. They've got to get a young quarterback at some point. So
what if you think these guys suck?
Back, you take a quarterback. Say that again.
Well, what if you think these guys suck? You're like, the only way that they don't take it, you can put it off forever. And I'm like, I would agree. You have to get a quarterback. But if these guys are awful, like if you're doing this and you're like, these guys aren't franchise quarterbacks. I mean, at that point.
Well, what did we think about Bo Nix a year ago?
Well, I'm talking about what you think. Like, I'm talking about like what I'm saying, like Sean Payton, because Sean Payton knows what he's doing at quarterback. Sean Payton was like, no, I think there's something there. My point is, if you are making this pick and your evaluation is, yeah, Sanders and Ward are not it. They're not ready to play day 1, or they don't profile to be starters or whatever. It's like that pick will get you fired if you evaluate them and they're not good.
Then this is a good question. Then what should get you fired is not being able to trade back at that point. Someone wants one of these 2 guys. You have to be good enough at your job to be able to trade back and let one of those teams come up and get that guy. If you don't like either one of them, I think one of the 2 is going to be really good. I haven't decided yet which one. I wanted the Titans to take Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. or a quarterback last year. If they had done that, they'd be in a much better spot than they are right now. So they have to get a quarterback. Now, to your point, if they think both guys suck, then trade back. You're going to be able to do that, especially when the Raiders, by the way, hire Deion Sanders, which I've said for 6 months is going to happen. Then you know that you're going to get everything from the Raiders at that point. So get ready for that to be the case.
How good is Travis Hunter going to be in the pros?
I mean, I think it's all about what team he goes to and how they decide to utilize him, right?
And what position would you play him at? I would play him at receiver.
I would play him up at both, but not at the same level he played at Colorado. Like, I do think, people are like, he can't do it in the NFL. He can't do it. I agree that he can't do it to that level and play pretty much every snap. But can he play, 50% of the snaps on offense and 100% on defense? Can he play 50% of the snaps at corner and then 100% on? I mean, I think he can. I'm not willing to rule that out. So I lean corner over receiver and just put him on one side and say, you're on an island, shut this guy down, the best receiver, and he's going to be able to do that a lot of the times. And then give him some packages or at least put him in at receiver also, where he's such a dynamic playmaker. But, yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a great pro.
Do you think Mike Vrabel will be a good coach for the New England Patriots?
Yeah, 100%. I thought Mike Vrabel was a very good coach here. I know the last 2 years were rough after his GM was fired and they were in first place and it fell apart, and then it fell apart the next year. I'm not making excuses for him in that last season. He wasn't good enough. But overall, Titans fans would take Mike Vrabel's tenure in Nashville over almost all the other coaches that have been here for the Titans. So I think pairing him with Robert Kraft and that organization clearly loves, you pointed it out on your show, he spoke so highly of them when he was honored. People made fun of you for bringing that up as a point, during that season. But you were right.
He got mad at me.
Well, you were right. He loves it. He was talking about the Titans when he talked about, don't ever take for granted how good you have it here. He was absolutely talking about the Titans. He loves Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft's a good NFL owner. He's going to do a great job. And he's got a quarterback. I think Drake May's really good.
How many teams are actually Super Bowl contenders?
I'm going to go Detroit. Detroit, Kansas City, obviously. Detroit, Kansas City, Buffalo, Philly, Baltimore. I mean, I have a hard time thinking anyone outside of those five are going to win the Super Bowl. Who?
Minnesota?
No, not a Super Bowl contender. I think Minnesota is going to lose this game to the Rams in Arizona on Monday night, and I think they're going to lead the season, and we're all going to be saying, man, if we wanted to have great regular seasons and lose the first playoff game, we could have just kept Kirk Cousins instead of Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold is Kirk Cousins, and that's what we're going to figure out in the end. It's like the Scooby-Doo meme where you take off the mask, and it's actually Kirk Cousins underneath for Sam Darnold. So, no.
You know what the problem with all that is, though?
No one outside of those five will win the Super Bowl.
I completely agree with you about Sam Darnold. And I love Sam Darnold, but I agree with you that he's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is not bad. My whole point with Sam Darnold was Sam Darnold's not bad. I think Jared Goff's the same thing. Now, I don't think you have to be an elite quarterback to win the NFC. I think you have to be elite to get through the AFC because there are so many elite quarterbacks in the AFC. And yet, I believe Goff is like Tannehill. He's like Darnold. He's like Cousins. And he's just on a great team right now.
I am rooting like crazy for a Detroit-Buffalo Super Bowl. I was rooting for it last year. I'm rooting for it again this year. To have the team that's never been there versus a team that's 0-4 in the Super Bowl in those two markets that, have gone through a lot, I would absolutely love that Super Bowl. So that's what I'm rooting for. And, yeah, I don't think Jared Goff's an elite quarterback. And that's no knock at Sam Darnold. I love Kirk Cousins. I think he's a good quarterback in the NFL. I think Sam Darnold was a very good quarterback this year. I think overall he is a good NFL quarterback in the right spot. But they're not a Super Bowl contender, even though they've had a very good year.
Okay, last one for you, Chad Withrow. Most outrageous AFC South decision, Ballard, Balky, or Brinker?
Whew. I got to go with Balky, and here's why. I do think that Jacksonville, to someone on the outside, would have a lot of hope. They've drafted so high for so long. They've got some talent on the roster. I think Trevor Lawrence is an okay NFL quarterback. I don't think he's great, but it's certainly not bottom of the barrel in the league. And if you could just start fresh, you could attract really good coaching candidates to Jacksonville. And at GM there, it would be an attractive spot if they could run the show. But now that you have handcuffed the new coaching hire to Trent Baalke, you really shortchange yourself with coaches you're going to get that's going to be interested in it. So because I think – and here's the deal. The Titans have just bottomed out. So I don't know that there's a lot of hope right now with this team and this roster other than the number one pick, which is a good spot to be in. But Jacksonville, I still believe there's something there if you get the right leadership. But that decision is so much worse now for them because they've handcuffed themselves to the guy who in part was the reason they got to this point instead of just starting over and, drafting high like they always do, but with a new GM.
Chad Withrow from Outkick, as always, on our program. Chad, enjoy the snow, enjoy the game tonight and the entire weekend, and we will talk soon.
Same to you. Have a great weekend.
Yep. Chad Withrow joining us as always. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
you have to look at the Packers, right? And I think that's why a guy like Reggie McKenzie, I think that's why he comes into play. He has a history, with the Packers. Obviously, he's with the Dolphins now, but it has to be somebody that's comfortable enough to feel that they could come in and be able to do their job without having to look over their shoulder too much. Because, let's face the facts. The way things happen, optically, it's not very attractive, right? So you have to be comfortable and be trusting. So that's more or less what I gathered.
That was TD yesterday on the program, and the Titans did interview Reggie McKenzie today for the job. And they also not only interviewed Reggie McKenzie, they also reached out, according to Ian Rappaport, to John Eric Sullivan, who is with the Green Bay Packers, who is the name that Kaharski mentioned 20 minutes, 2 hours after Ran Carthon got fired, which, again, I don't know if Paul pulled that out of his tush or not. So Reggie McKenzie at least has some experience as a former general manager. I can live with that, albeit it wasn't great. They didn't win a lot of games with the Raiders. And not only that, he drafted 1 All-Pro in Khalil Mack. John Robinson drafted 3 All-Pros in his first draft. But as far as I'm concerned, when I saw today that the Titans interviewed Thomas Dimitroff for their general manager position, I got a lot of respect for Thomas Dimitroff. I think Thomas Dimitroff is a very good football guy. He worked under Belichick in New England, but if you've ever met Thomas, he's so nice, so easygoing. He's so low maintenance for a football guy. Again, he comes from that Belichick crew, but he's not trying to be Bill. Last year, he's at the Super Bowl. We stayed at the same hotel. It was a crappy hotel. And he stayed at it. He don't care. Thomas is a good man. But I think he's an even better executive. But I don't want to get my hopes up of 2 things. One, I don't want to get my hopes up that they're actually running a real general manager search. That Amy Adams Strunk, Chad Brinker, Burke Nihill, the people who matter, that they sat there and they listened to Thomas and they took notes and they really thought to themselves, man, this guy could be our GM. They'll say it's a real search, just like they claim that their 2016 coaching search of Mike Mularkey, Terrell Austin, Ray Horton, etc., was a real coaching search. It wasn't. Mike Mularkey's gone on record and said that. In all seriousness, I wish and pray that this was a real GM search. I just am not going to get my hopes up that it is. Because I do feel like, as TD pointed out there, Chad Brinker's going to hire a Packer buddy. That's what's going to happen. And if you know who you're going to hire, then you're not doing a real search. I talked yesterday at length about how we found Caroline. I did not know who Caroline was before I told Ryan Porth specifically what I was looking for on the show. Ryan Porth posted for the job. And Caroline sent in a resume with Jason Fitz as a reference. Porth called Fitz. Fitz said, you got to hire her. And we went from there. And I truly feel like we found the best man for the job. But if I had wanted to hire one of my buddies so I could trust him, wouldn't have ended up with Caroline. So I'm not going to get my hopes up that the Titans are running a real search. And secondly, I'm not going to get my hopes up, even though Jason Jones at CBS put out a report last night that said the NFL was comfortable with the general manager position being the chief football operations post decision maker. I'm not going to get my hopes up that this is a real GM job. So we can talk about all the candidates and go over it and all that, but I just don't want to get my hopes up. Because if you told me, hey, Ran Carthon is out and they're going to hire Thomas Dimitroff and he's going to be GM, Brian Galliott's the coach, Dimitrov's going to be the GM, and Chad Brinker is, as soon as they hire him, going to stop worrying about the team and is going to focus on the PR staff and IT and the security and the field turf and everything else. If that was the case, I'd jump for joy. But I don't want to get my hopes up because it's the Titans, And if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. And it looks like Brinker's giving himself all the power, none of the responsibilities, and he's going to hire a Packer buddy. So I just don't want to get my hopes up. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, and I will be pleasantly surprised if it goes the other way. By the way, Dylan's mad that I didn't ask Chad about Mike Keith. I am a little surprised I forgot to ask Chad about Mike Keith. That's okay. 615-737-1025. Six-pack picks are next. Stillman & Company. Want to do that again? Fireball Hot Take Friday. You know I love Fireball whiskey. It goes down so smooth and it tastes so great. There's no better way to enjoy the cold than to heat up with ice-cold Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. Goes down so smooth and it tastes so great. Again, no better way to ignite the night than to do so with ice-cold Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. Ignite the night. Please do responsibly. Be 21 years or older to enjoy. That's Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. All right, Stillman & Company, time for six-pack picks ahead of what is going to be a great football weekend. I'm on Sirius tomorrow morning. I mean, I don't even need to prep. Watch the game tonight. Get ready for the games tomorrow. Ian, how did we do last week on our picks?
Well, we have a one open-ended here. We did pick tonight's game, Ohio State versus Texas. But other than that, let's see. You got Notre Dame. You missed the Bengals. You missed Buffalo. You missed Minnesota. You got the Titans. So we're at 2 and 3, depending on what this goes this evening, I suppose.
Okay. With that, let's get it started today.
Okay. It is NFL wildcard weekend. 6 games, 6 picks. The math works out perfectly here. We begin Saturday, 3:30, CBS, Chargers, going to Houston, taking on the Texans. Over-under, lowest of the weekend, 41.5. The Chargers are -3.
So I put 6.5. That's what I would take the Chargers at. I will take the Chargers -3. I think they get it done. I just think the Texans kind of stink. And I know last week they ran one series and they scored against the Titans, but the Chargers have the better quarterback. The Chargers have the better coach. I think the Chargers are the tougher team. Granted, all the stuff in LA is probably a lot for them, but I will take the Chargers. Give me LA to cover the 3.
Saturday evening, 7 o'clock, Prime Video. Steelers at the Ravens. Over under 43.5. No wide receiver Zay Flowers for Baltimore, but Baltimore is -9.5.
Ooh, that's a big number. That's a big number. I mean, the Steelers are spiraling. I'll take the Ravens. That's a big number. I do think the Ravens. You know what? I think the Ravens will kick the crap out of them. I'll take the 9. I said it at 6, but I'll take 9. God, that's a big number. Whoa.
Okay,
for a playoff game.
Yeah, that is a big number. We move on to the over to Sunday noon, CBS, the early game. Broncos going to Buffalo to take on the Bills. 47.5 for the over/under on this one. Another big number. Buffalo -8.5.
So I have Buffalo -10 as something is what I would set it at. I think Buffalo will cover the 8. I mean, look, I think Bo Nix, I am very impressed. You know, when he was going shot for shot with Joe Burrow, but the Buffalo defense in Buffalo, that is not the Bengals. So I think that the Broncos aren't ready for Buffalo at Buffalo right now. And so even though it's a big number, I think Buffalo will win by 2 touchdowns. I'll take the Bills.
Okay, the afternoon game, 3:30 on Fox, Sunday. The Packers at the Eagles. Jalen Hurts, quarterback for the Eagles, and Jordan Love, quarterback for the Packers, both expected to be full go. Over/under 45.5. Philly -5.5.
This is my upset special. I feel like Jimmy Kimmel back in the day picking the games on Fox. I think Green Bay goes to Philly and they beat the Eagles. I think Philly, they're going to rely on running the ball with they're going to rely on running the ball. Philly is with Saquon. I think Green Bay is going to bottle them up. They're going to make Jalen Hurts beat them. Xavier McKinney's going to have a big play for Green Bay. I'll take the Packers as my upset special. Jordan Love goes on the road and beats Jalen Hurts.
Sunday night, 7 o'clock, NBC. The highest over/under of the week, 50.5. Commanders at the Bucks. Tampa Bay -3.
I'll take Washington. I think Washington's a better team. And because of that, I'll take them, and I think Dan Quinn's a better coach.
Okay, and that brings us to the final game. Monday night, 7 o'clock, ESPN, ABC. Yes, this game has been moved to Arizona due to the wildfires in California. The Vikings at the Rams, 47.5 for the over/under. We got the Vikings minus a field goal.
Minnesota wins. LA's just not good enough. Minnesota's defense will carry them. And again, the Sanchez, Sam Darnold will get it done. I'll take Minnesota win. That's it for us. What a treat, by the way. Good football last night. Ohio State, Texas tonight, and then the Super Wildcard weekend. And Ohio State, Texas is next right here on 102.5. The Game. Stillman and Company. We'll see you all Monday at 2.